For investigators trying to solve a plane crash, the most important tool can be the black box. It records every detail in the cockpit.
Look at this. Where's Charlie at?
And tells investigators about vital conversations.
Damn, it's starting to rain.
Northwest 255, runway 3 center, clear for takeoff.
But in the crash of Northwest Airlines Flight 255,
I have never been to an accident of that scale.
it wasn't what investigators heard on the tape.
TCI was on set.
It was what they didn't hear
It was checked.
that would lead to an astonishing conclusion. Detroit, Michigan, August the 16th, 1987. It's 8 p.m. and the city is sweltering. 25 kilometers from downtown, Detroit Metropolitan Airport is one of the busiest airports in the United States. More than 1,100 airplanes use its 4 runways each day. Today, one of those is Northwest Airlines Flight 255, bound for Phoenix, Arizona. Captain John Mouse is in command. A Las Vegas native, 57-year-old Mouse is a veteran pilot. His first officer is 35-year-old David Dodds of Galena, Illinois.
Why don't you tell them we're ready to go?
Both have years of experience on this type of aircraft. The MD-80 is also known as the Super 80 and is the second generation of the DC-9.
The MD-80 was quite a bit longer. It had more powerful engines, so it could carry more people. For that reason, it was a better moneymaker for the airlines than the DC-9 was.
Look at this.
The sky between Detroit and Phoenix is filled with storms. Several are moving quickly towards the airport.
There's a line here.
For the crew, it's been a long day.
They're about 25 miles wide.
Well, if we get out of here pretty quick, we won't have a delay.
They've already flown from Minneapolis, Minnesota, to Saginaw, Michigan, and then Detroit. Phoenix is their next stop on the way to Santa Ana, California.
If we wait till after the storm's here, there'll be delays going over Waterville.
If they're delayed by weather, they may not make their final destination.
Let's get out of here before it starts raining.
The plane's 149 passengers are also eager to leave. Paula Sheehan and her family have been visiting relatives. They're heading home to Arizona. Her daughter Cecilia is only 4 years old.
Looks like bags are all in.
Why don't you tell them we're ready to go?
Ram 255 and Delta 50.
Flight 255 is running half an hour late.
Northwest 255, clear to go.
Okay, we're cleared to push.
Let's do the checklist.
Brakes,
Set.
windshield heat. It's on. Boost pumps. Unit 6. Cabin pressure controller, checked. Auxiliary hydraulic pumps and pressure, on and checked.
Yeah. It's starting to rain.
To beat the storms, they need to leave immediately.
Sign beacons. Go on. Before start checklist is complete.
Flight 255 begins moving from the gate to the runway.
Northwest 255.
But because of the weather,
Northwest 255, now exit at Charlie Runway 3 Center.
the ground controller gives them a last-minute runway change.
Okay, to Charlie for 3 Center, Northwest 255. Charlie for 3 Center, right.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently number 1 for departure. We should be rolling in a couple minutes. Let attendants be seated, thank you.
Blacker than hell out there.
Where's Charlie at?
By the time they get to the new runway, they're 45 minutes behind schedule.
Northwest 255, Runway 3 Center, clear for takeoff.
Within 17 seconds, 65,000 kilograms of passengers and aircraft hurtle down runway 3C. But moments before liftoff, Mouse discovers he can't engage the auto throttle.
Let's stay on. TCI's on set.
His computer isn't in takeoff mode.
They're on now.
Okay.
Clamp. 100 knots.
At 313 kilometers per hour,
V1. Rotate.
the pilots angle the plane's nose up for liftoff. Then something else goes wrong. Just under 50 feet from the ground, the aircraft begins rolling from side to side.
Power, lifeguard copter 102.
It rolls left and strikes a light pole. Out of control, Flight 255 slams into the ground, skids along a highway, and disintegrates when it hits an overpass.
I prayed that everybody made it, but I thought it was just a small plane because it happened so quickly. I didn't know it was a bigger plane, and it was just awful.
Saw the plane come through the viaducts, a big fireball.
Well, we got dispatch. It was a rainy Sunday night. And then he said there was an airliner down, and our mood kind of just changed. And the one guy looked at me, Dan, and said, well, I hope it's a small one. When we pulled up, we saw the cockpit and the word West written on the fuselage, and we looked at each other, and he said, it looks like a big one.
There's a trail of scorched bodies and debris more than a kilometer long. Just minutes after impact, paramedic Tim Schroeder is on the scene looking for survivors.
I have never been to an accident of that scale. We were struck by the magnitude of what we were seeing, the large scale of it. It was almost overwhelming.
From the little that's left of Flight 255, it is unlikely they'll find anyone alive.
And I buddied up with Dan, and we both started entering the wreckage. It was probably a minute went by, and Dan actually heard a noise. He asked me a couple times, do I hear anything? And I said no. And then finally I heard it, and it was more like a faint cry. When I turned my head to the right, I saw an arm underneath the seat. 1, 2, 3, lift! She was covered in some blood and some soot.
Somehow, 4-year-old Cecilia Sheehan has survived the crash. But she's badly injured. Tim Schroeder races her to hospital.
We have a 4-year-old girl found alive in the wreckage. She has a very weak pulse.
If Cecilia survived, perhaps others have as well. Rescuers spend hours looking through the wreckage for more survivors, but their efforts will be in vain.
We actually covered anything that was a body or a body part with a yellow blanket. It was just nothing but like a sea of yellow blankets, basically.
Northwest Airlines said 154 passengers and crew aboard the plane died in the crash.
Both Captain Mouse and First Officer Dodds are killed in the crash. 2 other people died when their cars were hit by the plane. This is the second deadliest airplane disaster in US history. Recovering in hospital with serious head wounds is Flight 255's lone survivor, 4-year-old Cecilia Sheehan. Despite her injuries, doctors say she will live.
Maybe God was on her side that night.
Within hours of the crash, investigator Jack Drake and his team from the National Transportation Safety Board begin looking for clues. Drake is a former Navy pilot who's been involved in hundreds of crash investigations.
You know when you're at a crash site because you get this combination of burned plastic and kerosene and sometimes combined with fire retardant foam that has its own distinctive odor. You know you've arrived when you smell it.
Drake and his team treat the crash site like a crime scene.
Our team consisted of 12 or 13 specialists, some of whom go to the site and some of whom do their work elsewhere.
They set out to examine every piece of wreckage to discover what went wrong.
They have responsibilities for looking at different parts of the wreckage debris and do qualitative analysis of those parts. We always look for the recorders first. They're frequently referred to as black boxes, although they're usually orange. The information is usually well protected because they're encased in a steel box that is both heat resistant and crash resistant.
Since the 1960s, commercial jetliners have been required to carry flight data and voice recorders. The CVR was first introduced in Australia following the 1960 crash of a Fokker F-27. The devices must be able to withstand an impact of 3,400 Gs and temperatures as high as 1,100 degrees Celsius. The cockpit voice recorder is intact, but the flight data recorder suffered some damage in the crash. They may hold the only clues that can help solve this accident. Both recorders are sent to the NTSB lab in Washington, D.C. John Clark is Drake's flight performance engineer. His first task is to make a map of the debris left behind by Flight 255.
When I first started seeing the wreckage, your mind immediately starts turning to sorting out where it hit, how it hit, not where the wreckage ended up, but those first few inches where the airplane was coming down.
Clark looks for ground scars and other impact marks, and interviews witnesses to piece together where the plane fell and how.
And that kind of gives you a sense of those last moments, what the airplane was doing when it hit the ground.
Clark begins to understand the final moments of Flight 255. According to witnesses, as it lifted off, it couldn't climb and flew in a nose-high position.
E1, rotate.
That could indicate that the plane didn't have enough power to get off the ground, that it didn't have enough speed, or that high winds prevented it from lifting off. Witnesses provide investigators with a critical clue.
You saw fire coming from the engine.
Several, including an air traffic controller, saw flames coming from the plane's engine before the crash.
Damn.
The engines become the first focus of this investigation.
They look for evidence of an internal failure.
The plane suffered an engine failure.
Investigators soon learned that less than a month earlier, one of the plane's engines was damaged when it was hit by a foreign object. It was repaired and was being monitored by mechanics to see how it performed. The team studies the remains of the engine for clues that it had either caught fire or shut down on takeoff. Despite what the witnesses saw, they find no evidence of fire or of a massive breakdown.
The information suggested that the engine operation had been normal.
Clamp, 100 knots.
The flames were the result of the fuel tank rupturing after the plane hit a light pole. The fire didn't cause the crash. If Drake and his team are to solve this mystery, they need to be certain about what happened in the last few seconds before Flight 255 crashed.
Well, I think probably the best physical evidence is what was on the flight data recorder. The flight data recorder doesn't tell you about weather, it tells you about aircraft parameters, aircraft performance essentially, second by second, even at quarter-second intervals in some parameters.
But NTSB technicians can't recover all the information from the recorder. They send it to the manufacturer to see if they can recover the lost data. While he waits for news about the flight data recorder, Jack Drake looks more closely at the weather on the night of the crash.
There was some convective or thundershower type activity that had moved through the area, and its impact on the accident required a lot of analysis.
Drake wonders how the storm affected Flight 255. He listens to the cockpit voice recorder for clues. He discovers the menacing weather was a concern to the crew.
Let's get out of here before it starts raining. Jesus, look at this.
Drake sees that there were several storms along the flight path, and they were getting closer to Detroit.
There's a line here, and a line between these two, and another one here about 25 miles wide.
Thunderstorms can create a very dangerous threat to pilots.
Since there was severe weather in the area, we always worry about microbursts.
Microbursts occur when columns of air shoot down to Earth. As a plane passes through, winds batter it from all directions, making it difficult to control.
In a microburst condition, you can get very shifting winds and also vertical winds that try to push the airplane into the ground. So you can get loss of airspeed, a very rapid rise in airspeed, and then also actually push the airplane toward the ground. And it requires very aggressive flying on the part of the flight crew.
This unusual weather condition had killed before. In 1985, a microburst brought down a Delta Airlines flight in Dallas, killing 137 people. At the time of the Detroit accident, there was no device at airports to accurately detect microbursts. Instead, pilots relied on reports from other crews. Jack Drake discovers that 27 minutes before liftoff, Captain Mouse and First Officer Dodds received such a warning.
Ground, this is 722. You just had a microburst out here. The dust just exploded down there.
Investigators suspect that a microburst may have slammed Flight 255 to the ground as it tried to lift off.
It was right after departure when the accident occurred. If they had struck a very strong microburst, that would be a candidate for one of the possible causes.
Satellite images taken at the time of the crash and weather data from the airport's sensors show that there were storms near the airport at the time of the accident. But there's no evidence of a microburst.
Wind and rain, but nothing that could be a microburst.
Around the time of the crash, the airport's sensors did record a dangerous gust of wind on the runway, powerful enough to set off alarms in the tower. Upon further investigation, Drake discovers that Flight 255 was still at the gate at the time of that alarm. So the winds couldn't have brought the plane down.
Sign beacons.
But they did have a huge effect on Captain Mouse's flight plan. The crew's pre-flight dispatch package stated that they would take off from runway 21 left. But with the sudden change of wind direction, ground control sends Flight 255 to runway 3C, the shortest of 3 available runways.
Northwest 255, now exit at Charlie runway 37.
Okay, out to Charlie for 3 center, Northwest 255. Charlie for 3 center right.
Okay.
Controllers try to have planes take off into the wind. The additional wind flowing over a plane's wings gives it more lift and helps it get off the ground. Taking off into the wind is safer, but taking off on the shorter runway now means First Officer Dodds must recalculate the plane's takeoff weight.
There's a runway change. You have to determine if the weight of the aircraft will permit it to accelerate and climb out safely. And this varies depending on the length of the runway, temperature, altitude of the airport.
Perhaps First Officer Dodds made a mistake in his calculation.
44.4. How can we be that light for a full airplane?
If he did, it could explain why the MD-80 wasn't able to make it off the ground. Runway 3C simply wasn't long enough. Using calculations based on average weight of luggage and passengers on board, Drake's team confirmed Dodd's estimate. The plane weighed 144,047 pounds, well below the allowable limit for runway 3C. It should have been able to get off the ground. Drake's investigation has hit another dead end. He and his team are running out of possibilities. Until technicians can decode the damaged flight data recorder, the team must rely on the physical evidence that's been found at the crash site. But when investigators study the cockpit's center console, they're forced to consider an almost unimaginable cause.
Is this the way it was found?
To get the plane off the ground, the flaps on the wings should have been extended to the 11-degree position. But the way the flap handle is damaged suggests the plane's flaps were retracted when it crashed.
The pin had left a mark. This happens because the aircraft comes to a very sudden stop and the handle jangles around, and it's a metal-to-metal contact that's exaggerated by the impact.
Well, stay on.
That indicator was that the flaps were 0 or fully retracted and the slats were retracted as well.
Flaps and slats are extensions that slide out of the back and front of the wing. They make the wing bigger, which increases the amount of lift they can provide. They must be extended for takeoff.
If the slats are retracted, and for the most part, with today's modern jets, the airplane is not capable of flight. It's not capable of flight.
If the crew tried to take off with the flaps retracted, it would be an astonishing blunder.
B1, rotate.
But a pilot who was lined up directly behind Flight 255 on the runway is certain the plane's flaps were extended.
And you're sure the flaps were extended?
Pilots in other aircraft that were close to the point where the takeoff had begun were telling us that they thought the flaps and slats were deployed to a normal position.
Investigators can't be sure whether the flaps were extended or not. The clues they need lie somewhere in the sea of debris recovered from the crash site. Eventually, investigators find the evidence they need inside a section of the plane's left wing.
Each component of the slat system has its own drive system, and one of those was interrupted by the light pole that passed through the wing. 18 feet of the left wing was severed.
The cable controlling the slats was sliced in two when the wing hit the light pole. Based on where the cable was cut, investigators can tell whether the slats and flaps were extended or retracted.
It severed two cables, and if you lined up those two severed ends, it corresponded with the slats being in the full retracted position.
It looks increasingly likely that the crew never extended their flaps. Only the damaged flight data recorder can verify this. Fortunately, technicians have finally been able to rescue all its data. A digital history of Flight 255's performance until the moment of impact.
I knew that if we had a good recorder, we were going to get data back. The flight data recorders in combination give you that time history that goes together with the physical evidence or physical damage.
As expected, the FDR confirms what the evidence has been showing investigators.
Flight data recorders told us that the flaps and slats had not been extended.
It's a major breakthrough. Drake now knows what brought down Flight 255. But the flight data recorder doesn't answer a more troubling question.
So, why weren't the flaps deployed?
For some reason, a seasoned crew forgot one of the most basic steps involved in getting an airplane off the ground.
Switch the colors.
2 months after the crash, Northwest Airlines Flight 255's sole survivor, Cecilia Sheehan, is released from hospital.
We can't be sure why the little girl survived. She's a very little girl buckled into a big seat, and she was more protected than adults that might have been sitting around her. But she was very lucky.
Jack Drake needs to know what contributed to the death of her family and all the other victims. He finds an important clue on the cockpit voice recorder. It shows that the last-minute runway change caused confusion in the cockpit.
Once the aircraft began to taxi,
blacker than hell out there.
Northwest 255, now exit at Charlie Runway 3 Center.
other activities were introduced that had the potential to cause distractions.
Did he say 3 Center?
3 Center, yeah, that's why I was thinking we had to go that way.
I was thinking 2-1.
Well, they made a wrong turn, which might have been confusing because they had to go a different route.
Where's Charlie at?
Right at the end of this ramp.
Charlie was...
No, it is Charlie.
You sure?
I think so.
The crew got lost on the way to runway 3C.
Ground, Northwest 255. I guess we went by Charlie. We're going to 3 Center right.
Northwest 255, affirmative. Make a left turn at Foxtrot.
They finally got to the runway 45 minutes late.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently number 1 for departure. Should be rolling in a couple of minutes. Flight attendants, be seated. Thank you.
But Jack Drake finds something missing on the CVR. It seems the crew overlooked a very important step.
We're okay for the center runway, aren't we?
Before they got lost, the crew of Flight 255 performed a number of checklists, but possibly due to the confusion of the runway change, they seem to have completely neglected the taxi checklist.
They apparently didn't consider the checklist, and key in the checklist is the configuration of the aircraft for departure, and the flight data recorder showed that was never done.
There are hundreds of small steps for a crew to take to get a passenger jet off the ground. Most of them are covered by checklists.
The checklist is a means by which you ensure that important items are positioned or done properly.
Transponder.
Instead of doing it by memory and having the possibility of a lapse of memory.
Brakes.
Flight crews use a very rigorous and regimented procedure of following the checklist.
Pressure control.
Verify that each switch, each dial, each lever is in the proper position before taking the runway for departure.
The first item on the taxi checklist is flaps.
One of the things that would have been included in their checklist was to configure the slats and flaps for low-speed flight.
But because they didn't run the checklist, the crew never set their flaps to the takeoff position.
I think Charlie was... No, it is Charlie. You sure? I think so.
They hadn't done this checklist at the time they normally would, and as the activities piled up that were potential distractions, they were further and further away from the point at which they would normally perform that function. Their mindset was probably that they had completed it.
The pilots got an indication that their plane wasn't properly configured. During takeoff, they couldn't activate the auto throttle because their computer wasn't in takeoff mode. Another step covered by the taxi checklist.
Won't stay on. TCI's on set.
This should have alerted them that they didn't perform the checklist.
If it had occurred to them at that point that we might have missed something else on the checklist, that could have led to a rejected takeoff.
They're on now. 100 knots.
Okay.
Apparently that didn't happen, and so the takeoff was continued.
With disastrous results. An alarm should have sounded when the pilots tried to take off with their flaps retracted. But for some reason, investigators can't hear it on the cockpit voice recorder.
When it activates, it alerts the crew that the aircraft is not in a configuration that's safe for takeoff.
Maybe it went off, or we just can't hear it.
The investigation team is determined to find out why the takeoff warning didn't sound. Technicians analyze the cockpit voice recorder for more clues, and they find something unusual.
They picked up some enunciations on the CVR that were not correct.
Stall. Stall.
This warning is alerting the crew that the plane is about to stall. But it should be coming from two speakers in the cockpit.
Stall.
Technicians notice it's only coming from one.
Stall. Stall.
As the airplane lifted off, there was a stall warning, and it has a typical characteristic of a sound like stall all, because there are two enunciations, and the purpose of that is to provide redundancy. But that redundancy wasn't there. We had a single stall. I went to an MD-80 sitting on the ramp at Detroit, and a captain took us through the process of checking out to demonstrate those different sounds.
Let's start with the config warning.
The takeoff configuration warning is what would have alerted them about the flaps and slats.
Flaps. Slats. Flaps.
Can we get the stall warning to sound?
Stall all. Stall all.
He activated the stall warning system by a test switch, and it said stall all.
The voice on the left channel is slightly different from the voice on the right, as it should be. But that's not what Clark heard on Flight 255's voice recorder.
Can you make it sound like this?
Stall. Stall.
To get a singular stall, he had to pull power to one side or the other. And one way he demonstrated that is he pulled the P40 circuit breaker.
A circuit breaker is the electrical switch that protects the circuit from damage caused by overload. The P40 circuit breaker is an important one in this investigation. It handled both the failed takeoff warning and the stall warning systems.
What struck me was, he said, I hear people doing it. I, of course, don't do it myself, but let me show you how. And he reached around behind him, around behind the seat and down low and pulled the P40 circuit breaker without looking. And then when he ran the stall warning system, we got the singular stall.
Stall. Stall.
It's a major clue. Clark could only reproduce the strange-sounding stall warning by pulling the same circuit breaker that's connected to the takeoff warning. This tells investigators that the breaker was tripped when Flight 255 tried to take off. Then John Clark notices something else about the P40 circuit breaker.
You could see smudge marks around the decals on each side of the circuit breaker. It looked like finger marks where oil had built up and dirt and grime over the years. So it told me that that circuit breaker was being used routinely by a lot of pilots.
Can you tell me why that is so worn?
It turned out that the takeoff configuration warning could be a nuisance to pilots.
If you're doing a single engine taxi, you have to push the throttle up further to get a power to taxi, and you would set off the takeoff warning system. And so they would pull the circuit breaker to silence it. It's irritating. It's a warning. It's meant to alert you. And if it's going off routinely all the time, it gets on their nerves. And so apparently pilots were routinely silencing those takeoff warnings.
Investigators suspect that the crew of Flight 255 tripped the breaker to avoid the irritating takeoff warning. And then, with the added delay from the runway change and the impending storm, they proceeded to take off without doing the taxi checklist. That might explain why the alarm didn't sound when they tried to take off with their flaps retracted.
We don't know if the pilot did pull that circuit breaker on that particular flight. There was certainly one error and the potential for two. I think that the extensive use of the circuit breaker because of the smudge marks around the circuit breaker and the pilot statements, I think it's highly likely that he did.
It appears the downing of Flight 255 was caused by pilot error. Now investigators can accurately piece together what happened that night in Detroit. But it would take another shocking accident for the airline industry to learn its lesson. Jack Drake's team has discovered what caused the crash of Flight 255, but cannot prevent it from happening again. 1 year later in Dallas, Delta Flight 1141 tried to take off without their flaps extended. The investigators who had been working on the Northwest crash are stunned.
I was very frustrated to learn that another airline had done the same thing in a different aircraft type about a year later.
Hey, before
The Delta crash would uncover potentially deadly flaws
Before start checklist, battery.
in the checklists commercial pilots are trained to follow. The Delta and Northwest crashes killed 170 people and had eerily similar causes. In both disasters, the workload in the cockpit increased.
Jesus, look at this.
Northwest 255, now exited Charlie Runway 3.
If we get out of here pretty quick, we won't have a delay. Auto land.
And in both, the pilots failed to perform vital elements of their checklists.
It is very unusual for a crew to not perform a checklist. They have done it hundreds upon hundreds of times.
Brakes, windshield heat is on, cabin pressure controller is checked.
The normal procedures were a little bit out of the norm, and as a result, it got overlooked.
To prevent this from happening again, aviation officials turned to a government agency that knows the importance of clear procedures.
4, 3, 2, 1.
NASA.
So they're in there, ready to go. All right.
Jack Drake and his team wanted the US Space Agency to help create checklists that decrease the odds of items being skipped. Asaf Degani was a research scientist working with NASA. After the accident, he took on the project of improving a flight crew's pre-takeoff procedure.
We looked for any research that was done on checklists or procedures in general, and in fact, we couldn't find anything.
So Degani had to start from scratch. But there are dozens of different checklists to examine. Most of the ones on Flight 255 were printed on a single card. They listed the tasks the crew had to carry out, but didn't give them a way to keep track of what was and what wasn't done. At the time of the Northwest crash, there were several types of mechanical checklists in use. The US Air Force used a scrolling checklist. Once a checklist item is completed, the pilot scrolls to the next one. American Airlines used a system that allowed pilots to cover up completed items with a plastic slide, so only the non-completed items would be displayed. Asaf Degani set out to see firsthand how pilots were using checklists. He wanted to make it less likely for them to make mistakes. He sat in cockpits and observed 42 different crews in action. Degani concluded that many checklists were badly designed.
There's a certain flow by which you go about checking things, and the idea is to prevent a case where you're doing one thing here, one thing there. A checklist should have a certain flow, which is a logical flow, and not one which is kind of random.
And they're ready, and they're going through there.
Degani also found a much more serious problem with checklists. If pilots are interrupted, they sometimes forget where they left off.
Transponder. Checked and on.
And there's many cases where people would do A, B, C, D, E, an air traffic call would come, they'd have to respond to it, and that's an interrupt.
Northwest 255, now exited Charlie Runway 3 Center.
They would go back to the checklist and skip a certain item and continue on the list, assuming that the whole list was done. People were very concerned about that.
To ensure no steps are missed, airlines train their pilots to return to the top of a checklist following the interruption and start over. Again, Asaf Degani sees a problem.
And we found that if checklists are very, very long and meticulous, that's overburdening the crew, and they sometimes would not want to start again from the beginning.
To address the problem, Degani suggests changes across the airline industry.
One of our recommendations from the study is to try to take long checklists and chunk them to small pieces so that if an interruption happens, then doing another 4 or 5 items, it's not a big effort as opposed to doing 20.
Degani even made recommendations about the typeface that airlines use, so they can be more easily read by pilots. Perhaps the biggest advance to checklists is the move from paper to computers.
Since at the time computer technology was coming into the cockpit, it made a lot of sense to think about the electronic checklist.
Today, Degani and his team are studying smart checklists that keep track of checked items. They provide pilots with a visual indication of where they are on the list, and in some cases verify that the task has been correctly carried out.
Electronic checklist shows you which item was completed and which item was not.
Computerized checklists are now slowly making their way into the cockpits of commercial airplanes. They make it far less likely that an accident like Northwest 255 could happen again. The FAA also ordered a modification to the alarm system of all commercial jetliners to prevent nuisance alarms. The takeoff warning was redesigned, so it could not sound unless the plane was actually taking off. Jack Drake went on to investigate hundreds of accidents over a 26-year career with the NTSB. The crash of Flight 255 taught him a valuable lesson.
This one is a worldwide example of the importance of following checklists and configuration being completed correctly on every takeoff. And so it became something that was a part of the training curriculum in virtually every airline around the world.
The case of Northwest 255 is no different. It's a series of events, runway change, task saturation, an overlooked checklist, a failed takeoff warning system. Put all of those together, those links in a chain, and you end up with the accident. If you were to break any one of those links, the accident wouldn't have happened.
Flight 255 will also be remembered for its lone survivor, Cecilia Sheehan. She's never spoken publicly about the death of her family. But she's stayed in touch with the people who rescued her that day.
She's full of life, and the conversations we have, it's more about, her sports and her husband and her vacations. She just said maybe one day she'll come out and tell the world what Cecilia is doing.
Good night now.
Sundance 518, taxi across runway 24 left. Contact ground point 65 when off.
February the 1st, 1991. Los Angeles International Airport, LAX.
246 heading 270, contact Los Angeles departure. Thank you, US Air 1493. You're cleared to land 24 left.
Cleared to land 24 left, 1493.
Traveling at 240 kilometers per hour, US Air Flight 1493 descends towards runway 24 left.
What the hell?
I pointed to the aircraft and yelled, US Air is crashing. The aircraft was fully engulfed in flames.
But the full scope of this tragedy is far greater than anyone can imagine.
Mayday.
At one of the busiest airports in the world, a Boeing 737 has just exploded in flames upon landing.
I think the thought process in the tower was, it was 1991, it was one of the first nights of the first Gulf War. And I think the thing that was foremost in our mind was maybe it was a bomb that went off on the aircraft.
As firefighters bring the blaze under control, rescuers begin searching for survivors.
About 5 minutes after the incident occurred, we got a call from an emergency vehicle.
Amid the wreckage, they have made an alarming discovery. One that forces everyone involved to re-examine every detail of the last 15 minutes. US Air Flight 1493 cruises towards Los Angeles International Airport. LAX is a central hub for international travelers.
Just confirm the visual approach for US Air 1493 is 24 left.
That's correct, US Air 1493.
For the approach, Captain Colin Shaw is managing radio communications. First Officer David Kelly is at the controls. With 89 passengers on board, the flight isn't quite full.
Well, I'd been on a business trip to Columbus, Ohio. I went from the business meetings to Columbus Airport and got on a U.S. Air flight that was nonstop to Los Angeles. I planned a lot of good things and good times for that weekend.
U.S. Air 1493. Expedite your descent through 4000 as much as practical, if you would. There will be traffic pass above you on the south side.
As the Boeing 737 nears Los Angeles, the approach controller tells the pilots to make a quick descent. They will need to stay clear of a flight passing above them.
Okay, I'll expedite through 4. U.S. Air 1493.
Landing at LAX can be a challenge for pilots. The airspace around the airport is often thick with traffic. On average, a plane arrives or departs every 50 seconds. Each of its 4 runways handles both takeoffs and landings. Taxiways intersect the runways at dozens of locations. The airport can be a maze of stops and starts for pilots following instructions issued by controllers.
737, turn right 010, intercept 4A.
You got the left side in sight?
Yeah.
We're out of 4.
U.S. Air 1493. Thanks for your help. Contact Los Angeles Tower 133.9. Good night.
Good night.
Gear down?
All right. You gave 3 bells?
Yes, I did.
Perched 12 stories above the ground, tower controllers have a hawk's eye view of traffic coming and going from the airport.
It was a busy night. There was a lot of airplanes. We had numerous arrivals and departures during that time of the night, so it was a typical day.
Elliot Brann is the clearance delivery controller.
The primary duties of the clearance delivery controller is issuing the routes of flight and the flight plans to the pilots as they come out of the computer. A flight strip is printed out, so you get a piece of paper with the call sign, type aircraft, route of flight. I issue the clearance to the pilot, and then I pass the strips, the flight information, to the next controller.
Brann shares flight information with 4 other controllers. 2 ground controllers, who handle planes moving between the gates and the runways, and 2 local controllers, who are responsible for planes taking off and landing. Tonight, local controller Robin Washer is overseeing the 2 north runways at LAX, 24 left and 24 right. She uses the flight strips to keep track of flights departing and arriving.
U.S. Air 23 taxiing to position and hold, runway 24 left.
Position and hold, 24 left, U.S. Air 23.
246, you still holding short of 47?
46, affirmative.
All right, you're next. Skywest 569, taxi up and hold short of runway 24 left.
Roger, hold short.
$28.75, good night now.
US Air Flight 1493 is about 13 kilometers from LAX. The pilots configure their plane for landing.
Speed brakes. Still working for a living.
All right. Flaps are going 1.
Flaps.
Now the pilots radio the LAX tower for landing instructions.
U.S. Air 1493, inside roll.
Waiting for 5006. Ground, tower.
Robin Washer is busy with other planes. She doesn't respond to their radio call.
Skywest 569, taxi to position hold, runway 24 left. Traffic will cross downfield.
Okay, 24 left. Position and hold. Skywest 569.
Wings west 5006, tower.
At 2166, connect approach 124.5.
30, green lights to 10. Gear, flaps, landing clearance remains.
Just 6 kilometers from the airport, the US Air jet still doesn't have the okay to land.
Sundance 518, taxi across runway 24 left. Contact ground 0.65 when you're off the runway. Good night.
Captain Shaw contacts the tower for the second time in less than a minute. He needs Washer's permission to land.
US Air 1493 for the left side.
24 left.
246 heading 270, contact Los Angeles departure. Good night.
But she's still focused on other planes.
Out of 1,000 feet.
Flight 1493 is now 1 minute from the runway. It's what pilots call short final.
Sometimes due to other priorities that take place, an aircraft might not get a landing clearance until short final.
Thank you, US Air 1493. You're cleared to land. 24 left.
Cleared to land, 24 left, 1493.
Looks real good. You're coming out of 500. What the hell?
The US Air 737 has barely touched down. It erupts in flames and crashes through Los Angeles International Airport.
I saw US Air touch down, and as he got about third way down the runway at taxiway 45, the aircraft was fully engulfed in flames. The supervisor ran past me to pick up the crash phone and alert the emergency vehicles to respond.
Aboard the flight, sheer terror.
There was a tremendous crunching sensation, and there was this extraordinary shower of sparks that shot by my window.
Good God.
Rosa Reynoso is a plainclothes officer with the airport police.
We see the aircraft engulfed in fire. My partner and I were probably about 500 yards from it.
Alert 33, runway 24 out. Affirmative, alert 33.
The initial moments were very scary, very chaotic. I remember just thinking to myself, oh God, please get some more people out here. Get me fire, get me officers, get me somebody, because this is not good.
In the tower, there's no time to dwell on what's happened. Other aircraft are still coming in to land. Controllers must direct them to safety.
Wings west 5212, winds 240 at 8. You are cleared to land. Runway 24 right. Use caution. We just had an aircraft go off the runway in flames.
The cabin of Flight 1493 is filling with toxic smoke. Some passengers rush to a door at the rear of the plane.
I probably got 7 or 8 rows down the aisle, and then I encountered a cluster of passengers standing in the aisle, not moving. I thought to myself, there must be an opening in the front of the plane that allowed for this tremendous quantity of smoke to roll into the plane so quickly. And so I stumbled forward to the cockpit area, and there was tremendous fire on both sides of the plane. I said to myself, my gosh, there's no way you're going to get out of this airplane, David. You're trapped.
Outside, some have escaped the plane. Rosa Reynoso is the first emergency responder to arrive at the scene.
The fire was intense. It was very, very hot. I mean, almost singeing us.
She needs to act fast to help passengers away from the burning wreckage.
The passengers were trying to escape the plane from the emergency exit doors. However, the fire had engulfed the doors, so some of the people that were fine jumped out of the plane and into the fire.
More emergency personnel arrive within minutes.
Both passengers are jumping out of that door.
Some people were on fire. Some of them were scratched, cut up. Some of them had broken legs. It was pretty traumatic. And I think you just start operating on knowing that you have to do the right thing and try and save these people.
David Koch is still inside.
I suddenly saw a crack of light, and my God, it was a miracle. The crack opened up, and I suddenly realized that I had opened the galley door.
But now he faces another hurdle. He can't even see the ground through the fire and smoke.
And I said to myself, what the hell, and jumped out. I landed on the ground and then started crawling on my hands and knees away from the airplane. I had a great sense of guilt. Why did I not go back into the airplane and say, follow me? And I think if I'd gone back into the cabin, I might have passed out and fallen on the floor and died. And that's how I've come to terms with the fact that I got out but didn't help anybody else out.
As the search for survivors continues, firefighters make a stunning find.
This is Rescue 1. We've got a propeller down here in the wreckage.
The discovery of a propeller has horrifying implications.
There's 2 planes down here.
As soon as we found out that information, we started actively looking to see what aircraft, if any, were missing. So we started looking at the flight strips that were already departed, and then we looked at the ones that were still pending. And then we called the departure control, radar controller to find out which ones they've talked to in the last 5-6 minutes.
What about SkyWest 5569?
No, we haven't heard from them.
SkyWest 569, taxiing to position hold, runway 24 left.
Okay, 24 left, position and hold, SkyWest 569.
Staff can account for all of the aircraft except for SkyWest 5569, a Fairchild Metroliner bound for Palmdale, California. Emergency personnel find parts of the smaller plane strewn across runway 24 left. There were 12 people on board the flight. None have survived. What's left of their plane is crushed between US Air 1493 and an abandoned building near the runway.
My first thought was, oh my God, there was someone else under there, and we didn't even realize it.
There's even more loss of life on board the larger plane. 20 are dead, 2 others are mortally wounded. First Officer Kelly has survived, but Captain Shaw has not. The disaster thrusts LAX into the media spotlight.
America's runways, according to the nation's pilots, the most dangerous part of the flight.
In the months and years leading up to the crash, increasing traffic was becoming a safety concern at Los Angeles International Airport.
The most close calls, Los Angeles International Airport. 33 near collisions over the last 4 years. That's 1 every month and a half.
The accident confirms safety issues need to be addressed. The National Transportation Safety Board sends its GO team to LAX to investigate.
It was kind of a horrific scene. The front end of the airplane was impaled on the captain's side against the building. And with close inspection, we could see parts of another aircraft underneath.
Investigators can see that the 2 planes collided at an intersection on runway 24 left.
The scenario of the accident resulted in 2 planes being on the runway at the same time. The runway was occupied, and that's something that should never happen when a landing clearance is granted.
Reducing collisions on US runways is a priority for investigators from the NTSB.
We had runway incursions on the most wanted list from 1990 here at the Safety Board, and it's a major concern for the whole industry. A runway incursion is simply when an inappropriate object is out on a runway that's going to be used for a takeoff or landing.
Some of the world's worst airline disasters have taken place on runways. In March 1977, on the island of Tenerife, 583 people died when 2 Boeing 747s collided on the runway. In January 1990, a Beechcraft King Air 100 was struck by a Boeing 727 attempting to land in Atlanta. Later that year in Detroit, another Boeing 727 smashed straight into a DC-9 carrying 44 people.
Runway incursions occur due to some failure in the existing system. Something has happened. Some directive has not been followed. Some inattention is present in the scenario of a runway incursion.
Which one of these planes was cleared for 24 left?
Investigators need to find out why there were 2 planes on runway 24 left at the same time.
One of the principal objectives was to immediately see if we could find out what error had taken place that would allow that situation to occur.
Part of that answer may lie in the wreckage. But 24 hours after the crash, the investigation is at a near standstill. There's too much fuel on board the 737. Crawling through the wreckage would be dangerous.
The aircraft had about 6,000 pounds, maybe 1,000 gallons of fuel on board.
How long is this going to take?
The Saturday was spent defueling the aircraft, and that's a very slow process. That took almost all day before the fire department could declare that the scene was safe.
With airplane parts littering the airport, LAX is running at half capacity. 2 of the 4 runways are shut down. That's causing chaos for travelers. When the NTSB team finally gets access to the wreckage, they're under enormous pressure to act quickly. They must gather all the information they need so the airport can be fully reopened. Their investigation has a dual purpose. They must figure out what caused the collision. They also want to know why so many passengers got trapped and died in the burning aircraft.
We're not sure what went on. We don't have a recording of it, but there were some altercations with people trying to get ahead of other people.
Making matters worse, one of the emergency exit doors is inside the plane, partially blocking the exit.
If you follow the instructions on the card, the exit card, it will tell you to throw that exit out. This did not take place, so the right over-the-wing exit was, I would say, partially obstructed by that large hatch.
The NTSB concludes that a reduced number of exit doors made it impossible for many of the passengers to escape. With no way out, they were overcome by toxic smoke as it filled the cabin. While some investigators analyze wreckage at the crash site, others focus on air traffic control.
Well, first and foremost, we look at the communications, then we also look at the procedures within the facility and how those are applied, and were they indeed followed.
To learn more, the NTSB collects the audio tapes of the controller's communications with the planes. Investigators wonder what instructions were given to the pilots in the moments leading up to the crash. They also want to know what the flight crews were saying during those crucial seconds. Did the pilots follow their instructions? The cockpit voice recorders should provide investigators with the answer. But then Bob McIntosh gets some bad news about the SkyWest Metroliner.
No voice recorder. Great.
We recognized, looking at the onboard equipment, that SkyWest 569 did not have a CVR flight recorder installed. And that was disappointing to us.
At the time of the crash, commuter planes were not required to carry cockpit voice recorders. This means the only SkyWest conversations caught on tape are radio communications recorded in the control tower.
Okay, 24 left. Position and hold SkyWest 569.
The two cockpit crew members would have exchanged words, would have been listening to the air traffic information that was coming into their cockpit all the time, and we recognized that that was a valuable piece of data that we lost.
Using the air traffic control tapes and just one CVR, investigators try to find out which of the two aircraft in the collision was actually cleared to use runway 24 left. The answer will raise alarming questions about the safety of all passengers flying to and from LAX.
246, are you still holding short of 47?
The investigation into the deadly collision on runway 24 left focuses on Robin Washer's conversations with the two planes involved. Investigators begin with the smaller plane.
23 taxiing to position and hold.
Minutes before the accident, the pilots of the Metroliner waited for permission to take off.
SkyWest 569, taxi into position and hold runway 24 left. Traffic will be crossing downfield.
We use the tapes to try to visualize, like a local controller would, where the aircraft would be on the runway.
The pilots of the SkyWest Metroliner turned their plane onto the runway and stopped at intersection 45. They had to wait for another plane to cross the runway downfield.
Okay, 24 left, position and hold, SkyWest 569.
Okay, stop her right there.
From the air traffic control tapes, the NTSB can tell that the pilots of the Metroliner followed all their instructions correctly.
All right, let's keep going.
Responsibility for the accident must lie elsewhere. Investigators probe the tapes further. They look at Washer's communications with the US Air pilots.
US Air 1493 for the left side, 24 left.
Thank you, US Air 1493. You're cleared to land 24 left.
A US Air 1493 was cleared to land on the same runway during the time that SkyWest 569 was still sitting in position on that same runway.
Cleared to land, 24 left, 1493.
SkyWest 569, right at intersection 45.
How long's it been there?
1 minute, 7 seconds.
The air traffic control tapes reveal that Robin Washer instructed both the SkyWest Metroliner and the US Air flight to use runway 24 left at the same time.
Left contact, ground, point 5 when you're.
What the hell?
When we're examining the recorded voice communications, what we try to do is to put ourselves in the position of the controller. What would she have seen? What would she have heard? What would she have done?
Investigators need to know what Robin Washer was doing at the time of the crash. They look at the other flights that she had under her control.
Wings West 5006, taxi across runway 24 left.
They learn that in the moments before the collision, Washer began to lose track of some of those flights.
Is that for Philippine 102?
No, sir, hold short. Wings West 5006, taxi across runway 24 left.
Wings West 5006 was an aircraft that was on the north side of runway 24 left who wanted to cross to the south side.
Wings West 5006, ground, tower.
And when she was ready to cross the aircraft, the crew did not respond.
Washer spent nearly a full minute of her time trying to re-establish radio contact with the flight crossing the runway.
Can I hear the rest of that exchange?
Wings West 5006, on frequency again. Change radio. Sorry about that.
They advised her they had inadvertently been on another frequency.
5006, you're back with me.
Yeah, we didn't mean to switch radios. We're on now.
And that created a distraction for the local controller.
Okay, I thought I lost you.
Sorry, we thought we lost you. We apologize.
Not a problem.
But investigators discover that that flight wasn't the only aircraft Robin Washer was fixated on in the moments before the crash.
Tower Wings West 5072 is ready for takeoff.
Wings West 5072?
With US Air 1493 less than a minute from touchdown, Washer hears from another Wings West aircraft, Flight 5072.
When Wings West 5072 called to say that he was ready for departure, it was obvious to us that she didn't understand who this aircraft was.
Wings West 5072, are you at 47 or full length?
We're at full length.
Okay, hold short.
Roger, holding short.
Investigators need to hear from Washer herself.
I couldn't find the flight progress strip.
They hope to learn why she didn't recognize a flight that was under her control.
I couldn't find the strip, so I asked my supervisor to help me. Francina, I need a strip for Wings West 5072.
She explains that as the pilots of the Metroliner waited on the runway for permission to take off, she was searching for another flight's progress strip. Before she could get back on track, US Air Flight 1493 crashed into the back of the Metroliner.
What the hell?
NTSB investigators now know that human error played a major role in the collision at LAX. Remarkably, when she cleared the US Air flight to land, Robin Washer simply forgot about the Metroliner waiting on the runway.
This situation that occurred is a situation that no controller wants to go through. You train your whole career for this not to happen. And when it does happen, it's, you can't even describe the feelings that you go through. A situation like this could potentially happen to anybody. We are all human.
After the accident, Washer left her job at LAX and never worked as an air traffic controller again. But investigators believe there are likely more causes to this accident than one person's fatal error.
Anytime that you do an investigation, it's easy to point the blame at one individual. What you want to do is to say, why did this occur, and what can we do to prevent a reoccurrence?
Answers to those questions begin to emerge as the NTSB examines the daily routine in the control tower in the weeks before the accident.
It was one of those, you don't know you have a problem until you have a problem.
It turns out another disaster was narrowly averted 7 months before the collision. A landing DC-10 flew just over an Airbus waiting on the runway to take off at LAX.
Los Angeles Airport has always been known as one of the #1 runway incursion airports in the system, and changes were overdue.
Controllers at LAX produced documentation showing that immediately after that close call, they alerted officials that the control tower was understaffed. They also explained that regions around the northern runways were invisible to controllers because their view was blocked by a light tower.
We went up in the tower, climbed the stairs, and asked the air traffic controllers to step aside while we sat in their chairs and looked out the window. The view that the air traffic controller was presented with had an obstruction, a light pole that produced a glare, and it was a light that lit up the airport ramp.
Robin Washer may not have been able to see the SkyWest Metroliner as it sat out on the runway. NTSB investigators look at other tools she could have used to detect the forgotten plane.
Surface radar is generally used during periods of low visibility. It is a tool by which the local controller, should they so choose, be able to visually confirm on that scope that an aircraft is indeed where it says it is.
Ground radar displays all aircraft and ground vehicles moving around the airport. But on the night of the accident, that system wasn't working.
You're holding short, is that correct, sir?
Yes, ma'am, we're holding short.
It was in constant out of service, in service, out of service, in service, and gave the management a lot of trouble.
The system was not very reliable, and we did lodge complaints to have it fixed and to upgrade the system as soon as we could.
Investigators learned that just 4 days before the accident, officials at LAX had formally asked the FAA to treat the failing ground radar with the highest priority.
the radar drive, and some of the drive mechanism had some ring gears and spur gears that they had to go to machine shops and literally make that part because it would wear out on a regular basis trying to rotate the antenna.
We looked into this particular problem and learned that Los Angeles had been slated to receive a new system in 1988. However, that date had slipped, and at that time, they were not sure when they were going to get a new radar system.
With the ground radar system out of commission, and with her view of the runway impeded by blinding lights, Robin Washer's chances of discovering her error were slim. Investigators turned their attention to the cockpit of the US Air flight. They wonder why the pilots didn't see the Metroliner out on the runway and abort their landing.
Well, most of us in the pilot community would recognize that it's our job to scan that runway and find aircraft that might be out there or anything else prior to landing.
Like all planes, the Metroliner is equipped with lights to make it more visible at night. There are strobe lights on the wingtips and the tail, navigation lights on the wings, and a colored anti-collision beacon on top of the vertical stabilizer.
We were concerned about the SkyWest lighting and had to look at the flight operations manual, and we found that the operating procedure for that company was to turn on the strobe lights only after clearance for takeoff.
So no other lights were required? Okay, thank you.
The Metroliner wasn't yet cleared for takeoff. So the only lights that would have been lit while it waited on the runway were the navigation lights on the wings and tail, and the anti-collision beacon on the tail. NTSB investigators then use a helicopter to put themselves in the position of the US Air pilots as they were making the approach to runway 24 left.
We went up and we actually flew that final approach in order to verify what we thought might be the condition of obscuration.
They positioned a Metroliner on the runway in the same spot where the collision occurred.
And sure enough, we could not see that aircraft parked out there at spot 45 and 47. You just couldn't see it.
Looks real good.
The investigation determines the lights on the Metroliner were the same color and brightness as the runway lights. The plane may have been all but invisible to the pilots of US Air 1493.
You're coming out of 500.
The anti-collision beacon in particular would have been lost in a sea of lights. When the National Transportation Safety Board releases its report, controller error is determined to be a cause of the runway collision.
We're in the business of determining why something happened. You may call it a cause or causes or contributing factors, but our job ends when the next accident is prevented.
Preventing accidents on the runways of LAX would prove to be a much greater challenge than investigators could imagine. The collision between US Air Flight 1493 and a SkyWest Metroliner alarms the public. The accident seems to prove that controllers cannot safely handle the increasing traffic at Los Angeles International Airport. The NTSB investigation points to Robin Washer's failure to maintain awareness of the flights under her control as one cause of the accident. But the report also points to a failing system in the air traffic control facilities at LAX. In the months and years following the accident, Improvements are made to air traffic facilities in an attempt to make the airport a safer place. The failing ground radar system is finally replaced with a newer model.
Today at Los Angeles Tower, we have the newest system out there. Each arrival or departure they're taxiing on the taxiways or on the runways have a call sign and type aircraft associated with it, so you have positive identification of all aircraft at all times.
New policies governing the way flight progress strips are handled in the tower are put in place. Ground controllers now organize the strips before they make their way to the local controller. The extra set of eyes reduces the local controller's workload. 5 years after the crash, a new air traffic control tower is built at LAX. The tower is 16 stories higher, 3 times larger, and offers controllers clear, unobstructed sightlines. New regulations concerning aircraft lighting are also put in place. It becomes mandatory for pilots to turn on all their lights before they move out onto a runway. But despite the improvements, the rate of runway incursions at LAX only goes up.
Throughout the 90s and even into the 2000s, I would describe it as a common event. LAX certainly was one of the worst airports we had for a number of incursions.
10 years after the accident, more serious runway incursions were happening at LAX than at any other airport in the United States.
They had double-digit runway incursions and serious runway incursions almost every year. And in fact, in 2007, they actually had 21 runway incursions.
In an attempt to reduce the problem once and for all, the Federal Aviation Administration begins work on a new system of runway lights to keep planes apart on the ground.
Runway status light system is a series of runway entrance lighting that we put at taxiways or takeoff hold lighting that we actually put on the runway itself.
The system is fully automatic. It uses a series of red lights embedded in the runways and taxiways. The lights warn pilots if there is conflicting traffic.
The runway status lights illuminate red, tells a pilot that it is unsafe, or a vehicle driver, that it is unsafe to either cross or enter that runway. And it triggers because there is an aircraft landing or departing. There's some other traffic on the runway. The runway status light seems to be one of the most effective systems we have for preventing runway incursions, and certainly the serious runway incursions.
In April 2009, the technology was installed at Los Angeles International Airport. Prototypes of the system have also been installed at Dallas-Fort Worth and San Diego. By 2011, runway status lights will be a key feature at dozens of airports across the United States.
The equipment we're using at Los Angeles Tower today is much better than the equipment that we used back in 1991. It's been upgraded, it's much more reliable, and it gives the controllers the tools they need to make sure that the runways are clear and to keep the aircraft moving.
Though new technology can never guarantee 100% safety, the improvements at LAX have restored public confidence in the airport, even among those who survived Flight 1493.
I spent a couple of days in intensive care at a local hospital, and I had nightmares, by the way, following my release from the hospital for quite a number of days. But I'm doing fine now. I have no problem with getting on airplanes and flying, and I've got great confidence in the airline system.
New York City's LaGuardia Airport, March the 22nd, 1992. A commuter plane with 51 people on board tries to lift off the runway.
Rotate.
But the pilots can't get it to climb.
They knew they were in trouble.
but they were fighting all the way to the end.
US Air Flight 405 plunges into the icy waters of Flushing Bay. 27 people die. For US investigators, it's an open and shut case.
This accident was not a huge surprise to us.
But Canadian investigators are stunned. They know the New York accident should never have happened.
My reaction when I heard about it was, my God, it's Dryden all over again.
3 years earlier, an exhaustive investigation into a crash at a remote northern airport had identified a killer and spelled out ways to keep it from striking again.
Certainly, if they had followed the recommendations in my report, the F-28 crash at LaGuardia could have been averted.
The LaGuardia accident makes one thing clear. The right people never got the warning. March the 10th, 1989. It's 11:39 a.m. at Dryden, Ontario's airport. Light snow falls as Air Ontario Flight 1363 stops in the remote northern community on its way from Thunder Bay to Winnipeg. The passengers stay on board while the plane is refueled. For flight attendant Sonia Hartwick and the crew aboard the Fokker F-28, it's been a frustrating day of delays.
Big, fluffy, white snowflakes at this time were falling gently to the ground, and it was very, very gray. And I thought, I guess this means we're going to be delayed again.
I can't see us making it to Winnipeg on time.
It's Friday, the beginning of March break. Already an hour behind schedule, another delay could jeopardize the vacation plans of many of the 69 passengers and crew.
There was a lot of families traveling on board with plans. Most of them were going skiing, and so they were very concerned about meeting their connections in Winnipeg.
Kenora, Dryden, it's Ontario 363.
Ontario 363, Kenora. We've got quite a...
As First Officer Keith Mills checks on weather conditions, Captain George Morwood returns from making a phone call inside the airport.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
And it won't clear till late afternoon.
Check that. Quite heavy snow. Looks like it's going to be a bad one. It's still within our takeoff limits.
Well, that's good. We got a lot of people who want to make their connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Temperatures hover around freezing. Visibility is decreasing. If the flight doesn't leave soon, it could be grounded indefinitely.
Dryden is a very small city. It's a very remote part of Ontario.
With a population of about 6,500, the isolated community lies halfway between Thunder Bay and Winnipeg. Harsh Canadian winters with bitter cold reaching minus 35 degrees Celsius are the norm here. It's not the place to be stranded in the middle of a snowstorm. Royal Canadian Mounted Police Officer Don Crawshaw and his partner are escorting a prisoner to Winnipeg.
When we did a criminal check on the prisoner before we left, he came up as a violent person. So two of us have to go with him. He was wanted in Banff on a fraud charge, and that's what he was being brought back to Alberta for.
Hey, no smoking and seatbelts.
On.
Instruments.
Syncs. Cross-check.
Captain Morwood uses the power of engine number 2, already running, to fire engine number 1. Morwood and Mills are both highly experienced pilots. However, they've each flown fewer than 100 hours in the Fokker F-28. The multi-million-dollar aircraft is the first Air Ontario jet to serve the remote Northern Ontario region. 24 minutes after landing in Dryden, Flight 1363 is ready to leave.
Inform Kenora, we're rolling.
We're fired up, taxiing for departure, requesting Airways to Winnipeg.
Hang on a sec, guys. Is there a chance that plane can hold? We're having some bad weather up here.
An approaching aircraft's urgent request to land
Unbelievable.
gives Captain Morwood little choice. He delays takeoff.
Okay, 363 is holding short of the active.
We are going to be a few moments until a small plane lands safely. We're sorry, folks. This just isn't our day.
In the 2 years that I had flown with Air Ontario, I'd never come across anything like this before.
The Cessna 150 lands safely, clearing the runway for Flight 1363's departure.
Tell them we're going immediately.
Kenora, Ontario, we're taxiing out at this time, 363 Dryden.
Finally, an hour behind schedule, the plane taxis to runway 29.
As we're going down the runway to position for takeoff, a blanket of snow was falling and I couldn't see the tree line anymore. It was like looking through a sheer.
Folks, we're sorry for the delay. Flight attendants, please be seated for takeoff.
At 12:09 p.m., Flight 1363 is ready for takeoff.
Advise Kenora, we're ready to proceed.
And Kenora, Dryden, Ontario, 363 is about to roll 29 at Dryden.
Ontario 363, Kenora, roger.
Captain Morwood performs a brief engine run-up, heating the engines to rid them of any accumulated snow and ice. Then he begins his roll down the runway.
When we're taking off, I'm usually very quiet and focused, meticulously going through a checklist in my own mind. What would I do in the case of an emergency?
E1.
The F-28 reaches its takeoff speed.
Rotate.
80 knots.
Our takeoff was very slow and sluggish, like a slow, sluggish person running up a hill.
Clearly, there's something wrong. The F-28 struggles to get airborne.
We cleared the trees. The plane started shaking.
I thought, oh my God, we're gonna crash.
That's when all hell broke loose. If you can equate to being in a Mixmaster, that's what the plane felt like at the time.
There's this dip to the left and then dip to the right. The pilot's trying to get this plane up.
Then all of a sudden there was a power burst. The plane seemed to stabilize itself.
You could feel that the pilot's trying to get control of it.
But a few seconds later, it became a Mixmaster again.
I yelled out, emergency, grab your ankles, get your heads down.
Grab your ankles, get your heads down!
And I kept yelling that, and then I assumed my brace position. You could hear people screaming and yelling. There's loud, horrible sounds. We are clearly crashing.
The pilots are helpless. 49 seconds after lifting off, Air Ontario Flight 1363 crash lands in the bush, 950 meters west of runway 29.
There was carnage of the aircraft all over the place. I didn't know where I was. And at that point I thought, oh my gosh, I'm alive. I'm still alive, that this is all happening so quickly.
When we crashed, we came down on an angle. It ripped the right side of the plane open, and that's how we got out, or else we probably would have never gotten out. Now, the prisoner was still in handcuffs, so I reached over and I took the cuffs off of him there, but he never left me. And then we exited the aircraft.
There's fire all around, there's explosions. I'm thinking, oh my God, we're full of fuel.
Guys, come this way.
And I started yelling, come this way, for people to follow my voice.
Come this way. Come on. We're gonna go
Passengers
this way.
scramble for safety before the fire spreads. 45 people survived the accident. but 24 people do not, including Captain Morwood and First Officer Mills. Emergency crews rush to the crash site deep in the woods. The injured are taken to hospital in Dryden.
I was very concerned because I kept looking at the wing all the time. I thought there was a lot of snow.
Well, I didn't notice anything wrong going down the runway. Like I said, it was just when we started hitting the trees, I knew there was something wrong.
Within 24 hours, a team of investigators from the Canadian Aviation Safety Board arrives at the scene.
You're going there, hopefully with the idea that you can find out what happened, why it happened, and how do you prevent it from happening in the future. We walked the entire path of the airplane to the threshold of the runway, and then we walked the flight path of the airplane right to the crash site. That was the first thing that I did. I wanted to document what I was seeing by photographing. When you walk in on an accident site like that, there are two things that overwhelm you. The smell of aviation jet fuel and the smell of death.
The trees just past the end of runway 29 give investigator David Rohr and his team vital clues about the F-28's failed flight.
What happened was the airplane went off the end of the runway in what we would call ground effect and just stayed at that height, simply clipping the tops of the trees.
Look at how these treetops have been clipped off.
It didn't ever fly. You've got 24 people that died. You've got 2 pilots that died and a flight attendant that died. And they died, for the most part, trying to do their job. So you really want to do them justice, but you also have to be fair. And if there were mistakes made, mistakes have to be fixed.
From the rear of the fuselage, investigators recover the F-28's 2 black boxes, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. The devices are designed to withstand temperatures of 1100 degrees Celsius for up to 30 minutes. Investigators are frustrated to learn that the mylar tape from the recorders has suffered extreme heat damage. It's estimated the black boxes were scorched by an 1100-degree inferno for at least 90 minutes, far beyond their limit. The data is unrecoverable.
That was a big blow to us because now you have to try and gather information and try and establish that it's factual by independent routes.
We were just about to leave Thunder Bay and they gave us 10 new passengers.
Investigators must now rely heavily on eyewitness reports to reconstruct the events leading up to the doomed takeoff. They learned that the F-28 began its day in Winnipeg and was scheduled to fly a return route to Thunder Bay and back with a stopover in Dryden. But in Thunder Bay, plans changed. The cancellation of another flight forced the crew to pick up 10 additional passengers.
And when they did their calculations, they realized that we were overloaded and something had to come off.
All right, let's offload some fuel then.
They ended up removing fuel in order to be within the proper weight.
Dispatch, Ontario 363.
So the flight was delayed an hour.
The extra weight of the new passengers left the crew no choice. They had to unload fuel to lighten their load. That meant when they arrived in Dryden, they needed to pump in more than the usual amount of fuel for the final leg back to Winnipeg. Rohr wonders if the change in plans somehow led to a miscalculation of the weight and balance. Was the F-28 too heavy for takeoff? He then uncovers a puzzling detail. The plane's weight and balance form for the takeoff from Dryden was never collected as required. It burned in the fire. Roa is forced to use Air Ontario's standard averages to calculate passenger and baggage weights. The data, combined with the airport's fuel records, allows him to estimate the plane's gross takeoff weight.
We knew how many people we had on board. We knew how many bags we had on the airplane. And we knew what our fuel load was.
He estimates the F-28 weighed between 62,000 and 64,000 pounds.
And the airplane's max takeoff weight was 65,000 pounds. And so we came to the conclusion that the airplane was not overweight.
The cause of the crash remains a mystery. 18 days into the investigation, the Canadian government appoints Justice Virgil Moshansky to lead a more wide-ranging inquiry into all aspects of the aviation system that might have contributed to the Air Ontario tragedy.
The government was looking for an experienced trial judge, and preferably one who had an aviation background.
Moshansky is an experienced pilot with 13 years on the bench. He will work closely with crash investigator David Roa and aviation consultant Frank Black. The new team's first step, assessing the plane's technical systems.
The electrical system, the hydraulic system, the fuel system, all of these systems are looked at both in terms of what is their history leading up to the accident and what remnants are remaining at the crash site that can be examined.
Clues to a possible system failure arise when Sonia Hartwig recalls a troubling event aboard the same plane just days before the fatal crash.
I think it was Monday or Tuesday. When we took off, there was this smoke that filled the aircraft, and there was this horrible smell. I thought, oh my God, we have a fire in the lab.
But there was no fire in the lavatory or anywhere else in the cabin.
They told us that apparently it had something to do with oil sitting in the APU system. So every takeoff that day, this would happen.
The auxiliary power unit is a generator that provides the power needed to start the engines. Did burning oil in the APU somehow cause a fire and ultimately doom Flight 1363? Roa searches the week's journey log for any mention of the auxiliary power unit. He makes a surprising discovery. The APU wasn't working on the day of the crash. It couldn't possibly have caused the fire. But the inoperative power unit may still have played a role in the tragedy. Investigators learned that it forced the crew to make a risky decision in Dryden.
We're onto the connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Normally, the captain would rely on the APU to restart his engines after shutting them both down for refueling.
But if he couldn't use his APU, he couldn't shut his engines down.
That meant Flight 1363 had to be refueled with one engine still running.
Captain Morwood is in a situation where he's got a hot refuel with passengers on board the aircraft. He's got to keep an engine running to refuel the airplane.
Hot refueling isn't against regulations, but the risk of a fuel spill makes it potentially dangerous. In Toronto in 1973, a maintenance person was killed when an Air Canada DC-8 jet was consumed by fire during refueling.
Hot refueling is not a normal practice.
Could the hot refueling have caused some kind of damage to the engines? The Dryden airport manager, a former military pilot, suspects there was trouble with the plane's engines. He tells Roa he saw the takeoff from his office and heard a sharp, explosive noise just as it disappeared from view. To him, it signified a flameout or engine failure.
I thought, this is going to be a high-profile and potentially controversial investigation. And the only way to ensure that the truth stands up is to have hard evidence from the aircraft accident. And so we took the airplane completely
and we put it in our lab in Ottawa.
Anything?
With signs pointing to engine failure as the cause of the crash,
strip it down.
Roa orders extensive engine testing.
Those engines were examined in detail for damage.
Roa finds the F-28's 2 Rolls-Royce engines suffered only minor structural damage. There's no evidence of an engine fire, nothing at all to suggest the engines had failed. With little physical evidence to explain the failed takeoff, investigators are back to square one. To solve the mystery, they comb through survivor and eyewitness statements. A common thread emerges.
They said in their witness statements there was snow and ice on the wings when the airplane attempted to take off.
Roa studies weather charts for clues.
We had very good meteorological information.
The charts show that during the half hour the F-28 was on the ground at Dryden Airport, visibility shrank from 4 kilometers to less than 1 kilometer because of the snowstorm.
And though we may find other reasons, for sure snow and ice on the wings was a factor in this accident.
Sonia Hartwig tells investigators about an unusual sight during takeoff.
As we took off, I noticed that the wings just became a solid sheen of gray, shiny ice.
Investigators consult the F-28's manuals to study its anti-icing systems. They find that only the wing's leading edges are protected.
The aircraft had heated leading edges on the wings.
I wonder if the anti-icing system was working.
And the heat was provided by bleed air from the compressors on the engine. They found the valves that allow the compressed air access to the leading edges. And they tested the valve to see if it functioned, and it did.
The anti-icing system was working. But since it only heats the leading edge, it likely didn't clear ice that formed on the surface of Flight 1363's wings. Investigators suspect that snow and ice buildup, what experts call wing contamination, may have played a major role in the crash. To verify that suspicion, Roa and his team meet with engineers from Fokker.
Thanks for coming. Curious to see what you have.
Jack Van Hengst, who was the chief engineer, had extensive aerodynamic studies and data on the effects of contamination on an F-28 airplane.
Fokker engineers have run simulations of the crash.
They were able to get some very good data in terms of the performance of the airplane, simulating the type of loads, temperatures, etc., that the Dryden aircraft would have been exposed to.
Investigators make a crucial discovery about the design of the F-28. Because of the angle of the wings, a very small amount of ice makes the plane susceptible to stalling.
They concluded that even the most minute bit of contamination on the wing would disrupt the airflow and cause a loss of lift.
Well, that answers a lot of questions.
The simulations support what witnesses saw.
It just barely got airborne, dropping wings, losing lift, and then hitting trees, decelerating to the point where it broke up.
Investigators are now certain that contaminated wings caused the crash. But what's still unclear is why the plane was not de-iced before takeoff. Almost all airports in cold climates, including Dryden, are equipped with the technology to remove ice from a plane. But Captain Morwood never requested de-icing.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
Investigators need to figure out why. They want to understand what made him risk his own life.
Let's hope it holds.
And the lives of the 68 other people on board Flight 1363. Investigators dig through Captain George Morwood's flight records and work history. They interview crew members, searching for clues to his behavior.
Captain Morwood was a very professional, very old-school pilot. He had his view on how things should be done properly and what his definition of proper and professional would be.
He also was very concerned about his passengers. He enjoyed making sure that they got on their flights on time and got to their destinations on time.
You know, Air Ontario was a growing company. It was their first foray into jet operations. I'm sure that there were many things that Captain Morwood would have thought in his own mind, this is not how he would do it. And I'm sure at times he probably let the superiors know that.
Morwood's history shows he's delayed and cancelled flights in the past because of icing concerns. Roa is stumped. Why didn't he request de-icing in Dryden? Another pilot who was at Dryden Airport that day provides part of the answer. He heard Morwood on the phone to Air Ontario.
That is what I have been trying to tell you.
He was very frustrated, and he was really concerned about his passengers.
Morwood complained to the off-duty pilot about the company.
These guys. You want to guess my weight before I left Thunder Bay? 66 and change. I had to offload fuel. Now that... Right. So now what am I supposed to do? No. You figure it out.
When he left the terminal, he was observed by witnesses to appear to be very upset and very angry.
Investigators wonder what set Morwood off. They try to piece together the pilot's day on March the 10th.
This was the 5th day of a very long week for Captain Morwood. And he was the next day leaving with his family on a ski vacation.
Before his first flight of the day, he'd learned the plane's APU still wasn't working. And then, once in Thunder Bay, more bad news. After refueling, the dispatcher forces Morwood to take on 10 extra passengers. Now he must offload fuel and lose more time.
There goes the schedule. Let's, offload some fuel then.
This meant Morwood would leave Thunder Bay behind schedule.
Dispatch, Ontario 363.
And Captain Morwood is the type of captain who didn't want to be late.
Now en route to Dryden, and an hour behind schedule, the weather forecast the crew was given of light rain and fog is no longer accurate.
And Captain Morwood didn't get the forecast of freezing rain coming into Dryden, which he should have had.
As Flight 1363 lands in Dryden, the weather was getting worse by the minute. The plane sat there for half an hour while snow built up on the wings.
I gotta talk to somebody about this.
Investigators may never know how concerned Morwood was about the weather. But there is evidence that it was on his mind. When Roa questions the fueling agent, he learns that Morwood did ask about de-icing moments before takeoff.
Is there de-icing available?
The fueling agent says he pointed out the de-icing ground crew to Morwood. The agent then offers a compelling reason that could explain why the captain didn't de-ice. Air Ontario had a policy prohibiting him from de-icing with an engine running.
The fluid can be ingested in the engines and then find its way from there to the air conditioning on the airplane and make it extremely noxious in the cabin portion of the airplane.
But if Morwood had shut down both engines, he wouldn't have been able to restart his plane.
Now, the only other way to start the airplane on the ground is with a ground-based air cart that can provide the compressed air. And Dryden did not have the capability to start the airplane.
The equipment would have had to be flown in from Winnipeg. It would have been a costly decision.
If he shut it down, he would ground the aircraft there effectively, requiring the billeting of passengers in hotels and at an expense to the airline for which he would be answerable.
Right. So now what?
So he was under a great deal of pressure.
No. You figure it out.
And I believe that the conversation on the phone would have been about that scenario and his displeasure with it. But he didn't have any other chance.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
Quite heavy snow. Looks like it's going to be a bad one. It's still within our takeoff limits.
Well, that's good. We got a lot of people who want to make their connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Though the amount of snow on the wings was still within limits, it's what lay under the snow that doomed the flight. The fuel in a plane's wing can get as cold as -40 degrees Celsius. The frigid fuel cools the metal surface of the wing. When snow hits this supercooled surface, it freezes instantly into a barely visible layer of ice. It's a process called cold soaking.
And this, of course, is what's disrupting the airflow on the wing and destroying the lifting capabilities.
Tell them we're going immediately.
Kenora, Ontario, we're taxiing out at this time, 360.
The only reason that I can possibly think of that led to his decision to execute the takeoff was the fact that he didn't consider the cold soaking phenomena and the fact that those wings could still have ice on them.
Advise Kenora, we're ready to proceed.
And Kenora, Dryden, Ontario.
Perhaps not wanting to face the consequences of shutting down his engines, Morwood opted to take off for Winnipeg without de-icing his plane.
He must have concluded that the ice would blow off on takeoff. That is where he made a mistake, a tragic mistake.
But Mashansky concludes that despite his mistake, Captain Morwood is not solely responsible for the crash.
It wasn't simply pilot error. There were myriad of factors which were the cause of the accident.
One of the most important factors, Air Ontario's decision to let the plane fly with a broken APU.
They were deferring a lot of the maintenance that should have been done because of a shortage of parts. And then they had to scrounge around all across Canada with various F-28 operators to borrow parts from them. And this was a very bad move on the part of Air Ontario management.
The investigation determines that by cutting corners and focusing too much on the bottom line, the airline was putting all their passengers and employees at risk.
Because the F-28s were new to Air Ontario, there was this urgency to get one crew off and get the next crew on flying. This urgency to have them in the air producing money.
I came to the conclusion after a lot of thought about this accident that there were a lot of other hands on those throttles, pushing those throttles forward. There were a lot of people that were involved in the sequence of events that led to this tragic outcome.
This was a preventable accident, but everything conspired against the pilots.
I gotta talk to somebody about this.
Because Air Ontario management did not have a safety culture. And you have to have a safety culture from the top management down.
Knowing there are dozens of Fokker F-28s flying around the world, Justice Mashansky takes an unusual step. He releases a report well before his inquiry concludes.
Good afternoon.
It warns of the plane's vulnerability to ice buildup and stresses the need for frequent de-icing in winter conditions.
Even a small amount of icing would be disastrous on an F-28.
But 15 months later, it becomes clear that Mashansky's warnings have not been heard. US Air Flight 405 is preparing to fly from New York to Cleveland on March the 22nd, 1992. The plane is a Fokker F-28, and it's snowing. It's 1 degree below freezing. At 9 p.m., the jet is being de-iced for a second time since its arrival from Florida. In the past hour, an inch of snow has fallen and shows no signs of stopping.
US Air 405, clear to taxi runway 13.
The crew prepares for takeoff. Flight 405 is an hour and 45 minutes behind schedule when Captain Wallace Majeur starts taxiing to runway 13. Then, unexpectedly,
US Air 405, turn left and hold short of Echo.
Left on the inner to hold short of Echo.
At 9:07 p.m., Flight 405 is forced to wait on the taxiway near runway 13. Another 23 minutes pass. First Officer John Rashuba turns on a light that illuminates his wings. He checks the right wing for ice. He sees none.
Looks pretty good to me as far as I can see.
US Air 405, runway 13, clear for takeoff.
Even though it's now been 35 minutes since their last de-icing, the crew does not request another.
Takeoff thrusts set. Temps okay.
Everything proceeds as it should, until...
V1. Rotate.
Just after the F-28 begins its rotation.
The aircraft had enough flying speed to lift off, barely lift off. The wings just could not support the airplane. They knew they were in trouble.
13 seconds after lifting off, Flight 405 crashes on the shore of Flushing Bay.
I don't think any pilot really thinks he's going to crash. They were trying to save the airplane right to the end.
27 of the 51 people on board are killed. Another Fokker F-28 has crashed, with tragic consequences.
My reaction when I heard about it was, my God, it's Dryden all over again.
Within days, investigator in charge Robert Benson suspects that ice on the wings was the major cause.
It would be very, very difficult for either of the pilots to really detect ice on the wings, looking backwards over their shoulders through the side windows of the airplane.
Looks pretty good to me as far as I can see.
So the captain was faced with quite a problem. If he wanted to be de-iced a third time, he would have had to get out on the lines, taxi all the way back into the parking area, and meet up with a de-icing truck again.
Takeoff thrusts.
That would have put him very, very late, and it may have even caused the cancellation of the flight.
After all of this work, after all of the efforts, to see it happen again was extremely frustrating.
There were no regulations in place requiring the crew to seek another de-icing after their extended delay. But Justice Mashansky had called attention to the dangers of long wait times when he issued his interim report.
If they had followed the recommendations in my second interim report, this accident certainly could have been averted.
He also had drawn attention to the limitations of the de-icing fluid being used at the time. Called Type 1 fluid, it's a mixture of antifreeze and water.
Those chemicals are designed that as you accelerate down the runway, that they'll actually shed off your wing, so that when you actually want the wing to lift and produce lift, that it's not contaminated.
Type 1 fluid is applied hot to de-ice the plane's surfaces. But it doesn't last long.
Type 1 fluid had a holdover time in their best conditions of about 15 minutes. Under poor conditions, such as freezing rain, it could be as low as 6 minutes.
During the Air Ontario investigation, Mashansky's team reached a stark conclusion about the effectiveness of Type 1 fluid. Even if Captain Morwood could have de-iced his plane in Dryden,
We're fired up, taxiing for departure, requesting Airways to Winnipeg.
it may have made no difference.
Hang on a sec, guys. Is there a chance that plane can hold? We're having some bad weather up here.
Unbelievable.
Flight 1363 had to wait for the troubled Cessna 150 to land.
By the time he waited for this 150 aircraft and pilot to land, and then they backtracked and got into position, now they're in a serious snowstorm, and they are getting contaminated.
Even if Morwood had de-iced during his 30 minutes on the ground,
Rotate.
the delay may have been enough for the fluid to stop working. The plane's wings may once again have become coated in ice.
It came out in the examination of Air Ontario pilots that there was a dire need for training in terms of how the de-icing, anti-icing systems worked and how long your aircraft was protected.
As soon as our accident occurred up in New York, we of course understood that it was a similar aircraft, in fact a nearly identical aircraft to the Didnt accident airplane. The circumstances were similar in both accidents, and the Didnt report was a tour de force, which helped us focus our investigation quite a bit.
Justice Mashansky had released his interim report more than a year before the crash of Flight 405. His recommendations could have prevented it. Mashansky would soon discover that a breakdown in communication had cost the lives of 27 people in New York. During his inquiry, Justice Mashansky learned that there was another type of de-icing fluid available to the airline industry. It's called Type 2 fluid. It's thicker than Type 1, which prevents it from immediately flowing off an aircraft.
A Type 2 fluid is a much more gooey substance. I've heard it referred to as almost mucus-like.
With holdover times of up to 45 minutes, it keeps ice from accumulating, then blows off the plane's surfaces at takeoff. 15 months before the US air crash, Mashansky recommended greater use of the thicker Type 2 fluid. Mashansky's investigators also studied de-icing practices at Toronto's Pearson Airport.
We got hold of a film crew, and we waited and watched the weather very carefully until we found a forecast of freezing rain. And we tracked one aircraft which was heading for the Caribbean.
The investigators discovered an alarming gap in the time between de-icing and takeoff.
And from the time the aircraft was de-icing on the gate until the time the aircraft took off was somewhere in the order of 41 minutes. So there was no doubt that aircraft were departing Pearson Airport with a partially or largely contaminated wing surface. We then went to Chicago O'Hare. This was the first airport to actually put in place runway and de-icing pads. And it was very useful in terms of explaining to us how these had evolved, what type of de-icing equipment they were using on them, how they worked.
At the time of the US air crash, LaGuardia did not offer de-icing at the runway, only at the gate. Again, 15 months before the crash, Justice Mashansky recommended the placement of de-icing facilities at runways instead of terminal gates. Mashansky also recommended that pilots not only inspect their wings from the cockpit,
Looks pretty good to me as far as I can see.
but also from the cabin.
US Air 405, runway 13, cleared for takeoff.
Mashansky claims that his report could have prevented the crash at LaGuardia. But the Federal Aviation Administration claims it never received his report in 1990, and therefore couldn't pass the information along to airlines and pilots. But Justice Mashansky doesn't accept that.
My second interim report went out in December of 1990. It was about a year and a half before the LaGuardia crash occurred. So I think probably sat on somebody's desk.
The crash of Flight 1363 resulted in dozens of recommendations that could save lives. The crash of Flight 405 ensured those recommendations were widely implemented.
Well, there was a lot that came out of Didnt. I mean, the commission came out with 192 recommendations. It changed the whole nature of how we approach contamination.
We now have runway and de-icing pads, so they can get a final de-icing before they take off. This was something directly the result of the Dryden Commission inquiry.
Today, most airlines use a new type of de-icing fluid. Type 4 de-icing fluid lasts longer. It will stick to a wing for up to 2 hours. As well, air traffic controllers must now be able to tell flight crews how long they will be delayed at the runway after being de-iced.
Dryden is really the first accident that explored not only what happens in the pointed end of an airplane, but what happens within a corporate culture. It put CEOs on notice that they can't hide in the woodwork when an accident occurs.
Dutch manufacturer Fokker went bankrupt in 1996. Despite this, in 2009, there were still 55 Fokker F-28 jets in operation worldwide, mostly in warmer climates.
Nobody should ever lose their life due to a contamination accident again in commercial aviation, anywhere in a snow and ice environment. We've learned all the lessons.
Miami Beach, Florida. Sun, sand, and calm blue seas. But when a tourist points his camera towards the sky, he captures a scene of horror. A plane is falling to the sea.
We have a code 4. Repeat, code 4. The plane down in the water.
As soon as I saw this, I realized, I'm like, oh no, this is the Chalk's airplane crashing.
The downed plane is Chalk's Ocean Airways Flight 101, bound for the Bahamas.
Could it have been a collision with an object? Could it have been a fire? Could it have actually been a criminal act?
Let's notify the FBI.
The incredibly rare video may hold the answers.
Can you enhance that for me?
An airline renowned for safety has made a fatal error. But it will take investigators hundreds of hours to finally uncover it.
Bingo.
The Port of Miami, December the 19th, 2005. Giant freighters and ocean-going cruise ships are a common sight. But there's another, much smaller craft that's often seen in this port. Chalk's Ocean Airways flies seaplanes in and out of this busy waterway. Today, Flight 101 from Fort Lauderdale is making a brief stopover here on its way to the Bahamas.
Feather propellers.
Check.
Shut down engine number 1.
Shutting down engine number 1.
Chalk's flies to 2 regular destinations, both in the Bahamas. Bimini, where Flight 101 is scheduled to land this afternoon, and Paradise Island.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking.
We're just making a short stopover here in Miami to pick up a couple passengers. We apologize for the delay. We'll be on our way again soon.
How many are we picking up?
Just 2, but they're VIPs.
For a small community like Bimini, Chalk's seaplanes are a lifeline.
And it's just so much easier in the seaplane to get to the North Island where most of the population is than going to the airport down there. So that was the main thing. It was a convenience factor.
Welcome aboard. I see your boarding passes.
Certainly.
Sergio D'Angelicourt is a Bacardi rum executive. He's the great-great-grandson of the company's founder. The family is well known in the local Cuban community for their anti-Castro politics. He and his wife are flying to the Bahamas to buy a yacht.
Passengers settled in?
We're all set.
Good afternoon, folks.
We'd like to welcome you aboard Chalks Ocean Airways Flight 101 to Bimini. Our travel time to Bimini will be 25 minutes.
Hope you enjoy the flight. Let's have the startup checklist, please.
Roger.
Michelle Marks is in command of today's flight. She was promoted to captain earlier this year. First Officer Paul DeSanctis joined the airline 8 months ago.
Starter on.
Starter on.
This is his first flight with Captain Marks.
All clear to taxi?
All clear.
The Grumman Mallard is a twin turboprop design. It has a V-shaped hull and underwing pontoons. It's designed to carry up to 17 passengers. The plane has retractable landing gear, so it can operate on either land or sea.
Gear coming up.
Takeoff in the Mallard, depending on the days, it could be a lot of fun or it could be a real challenge.
Weight and balance check. We're good.
The Miami seaplane base has no control tower. The crew has to keep a lookout for boat traffic as they taxi through one of the busiest ports in the world.
Taking off out of Miami in the shipping channel, it's kind of like trying to take off during rush hour traffic. You've got boat traffic, wave traffic, the wind, the airplane to deal with, and everybody's going different speeds, and you're trying to get up and go and navigate around everybody, so it was always a handful.
Flight 101 will take off from X-44, a seaplane base near a channel known as Government Cut.
Prepare for takeoff.
Roger. Ready to take off.
Both pilots have their hand on the throttles. It's to prevent the captain from inadvertently pulling back if the plane hits a wave.
45 knots. 50 knots.
This is the moment most passengers are paying for, the takeoff. Half speedboat, half plane. It's a unique thrill.
75 knots. 80 knots.
For the pilots, accelerating through the waves is often the most difficult part of the flight.
The airplane itself was really hard to fly as far as on the water, getting onto the step, which was what we call getting on plane. And in rough sea conditions and in rough wave conditions, it could be a real challenge.
But this takeoff goes smoothly. Flight 101 is no longer a boat, it's now a plane en route to Bimini. It's 2:38 in the afternoon. The plane's flight path takes it past South Beach, where sunbathers and surfers are out in force. Just less than a minute into the flight, the Grumman Mallard is climbing through 500 feet, well below the clouds. Then, the plane rolls violently and dives. The pilots barely have time to register what's happening. Their struggles are in vain. By chance, a tourist from New York catches Flight 101's final moments on his camera. 60 seconds after takeoff, the plane slams into the ocean. Lucas Bocanegra is a lifeguard stationed on South Beach near the Chalks Ocean Airways sea lane.
As soon as I saw this, I realized, I'm like, oh no, this is the Chalks airplane crashing.
We have a code 4. Repeat, code 4. A plane down in the water.
This is Lucas. We're launching the jet ski.
The two lifeguards are the first rescuers to go looking for the plane.
We drove as fast as we could to the scene of the accident. There was a lot of things coming through my head. I was nervous, scared. I was kind of full of adrenaline. We wanted to go in and try to rescue as many people as we could, but at the same time, we've never trained for a situation like this. As soon as we turned government cut, those jetty rocks, we noticed that it was very calm, very quiet. It wasn't like the ocean side where it was very rough. There was no waves. It was very, kind of very eerie.
At first, Lucas Bocanegra finds no sign of Flight 101 or any of the passengers.
Little by little, we started seeing debris float up onto the surface of the water. And we saw some chairs, some luggage here and there, and suddenly we noticed it was a body in the water. As soon as we put the body on our jet ski, we realized that from his injuries that there was nothing we could do. From there, it was just try to recover as many bodies, you know, bring them back for their families.
News crews swarmed the beach.
Chalks Flight 101 plummeted into the channel in full view of tourists lining Miami Beach.
Even a fraction of a second, the whole plane was engulfed in flames.
Black smoke and then an explosion. Pure fire in the sky.
It was so surreal, we couldn't believe that we actually witnessed that.
Chopper 4 over the wreckage as Miami Beach Coast Guard look for any survivors.
But the effort is futile.
We retrieved some of the bodies, but we were unable to find anyone that had survived.
All 20 people on board are dead, including pilots Paul DeSanctis and Michelle Marks. The residents of Bimini are devastated by the horrific news.
I was very sad for the crew and the friends that I had lost on the airplane. You never expect an accident to actually happen. And to see that on television like I did, it was very, very sad.
In Washington, senior NTSB investigator Bill English is put on the case.
I was just in my office doing some routine paperwork for something else, and the director stuck his head around the corner and said, "Oh, there's been an accident." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And he mentioned a Grumman mallard. So I immediately knew it had to be Chalks.
Within hours, investigators are at the crash site, where 19 bodies have been recovered. One is still missing.
I was very familiar with Chalks Airways. I'm a seaplane-rated pilot myself, and there is the reputation, the legend of Chalks Airways, the oldest continuously operating airline.
Chalks has a long and rich history. The airline was founded in 1917. During the Prohibition era, passenger lists included notorious rum runners and later Hollywood movie stars. Chalks planes even patrolled for German U-boats during World War II.
The novelty of flying at Chalks, it was just all that history, all the people that have gone, and it was really a great place to work for that.
The Grumman Mallard flying boat that crashed was built in 1947. Chalk's Ocean Airways is the only airline that uses mallards to transport passengers.
They're not really a mainstream type of airplane, and so there's always that nostalgia about them.
Salvage crews find the plane's black box. Investigators send it to the NTSB in Washington. The box promises to reveal critical information about what the pilots were doing in the seconds leading up to the tragic mid-air disaster.
In any investigation, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder are a great desire. More data, the better. We can always learn something.
But Bill English knows he isn't going to get all the data he wants.
Okay, thanks.
The only recorder on board the Mallard was a cockpit voice recorder, or CVR.
Most airline aircraft have two flight recorders. The flight data recorder, depending on the aircraft, will record all sorts of parameters of the flight: altitude, airspeed, control positions, and so on. The Chalk's airplane was not equipped with a flight data recorder. It did have a cockpit voice recorder.
Though the lack of flight data is a big disappointment, media coverage of the crash gives investigators a very rare piece of evidence.
Authorities revealed that the final seconds of Flight 101 were captured on amateur video. The dramatic footage was shot by a tourist on South Beach.
Let's get a copy of that video. Okay, let's see it.
The video only captured the final seconds of the plane crash, but it confirms eyewitness reports that a wing ripped off in midair.
Can you enhance that for me?
The video showed the wing just after separation from the aircraft, the main part of the aircraft fuselage rolling off in the other direction, and the fire and smoke starting from that.
It was quite startling that the wing would fall off in this plane. It was a beautiful day. The water wasn't rough on the takeoff, and all of a sudden this wing just dropped off. It must have been absolutely devastating.
However, the video can't reveal why the wing came off. Answers to that question may lie at the crash site, where salvage crews are finishing their recovery of the wreckage of Flight 101. The right wing is found separate from the plane, but largely intact.
Wings falling off aircraft, modern day situations, is a very rare extreme event, and there's only been a few cases of them in the past 20 or 30 years.
In Washington, another type of examination is already underway. At the NTSB lab, technicians are busy analyzing the Mallard's cockpit voice recorder tape.
The cockpit voice recorder, CVR, which does what it sounds like, records the pilots' voices talking to each other or on the microphones.
But the tape is a jumble of voices and sounds. Technicians can't retrieve any useful information.
It turned out that the erase head function, it's just like a tape recorder that most people are familiar with. It didn't erase the old stuff, so every subsequent flight kept getting recorded over and over and over again, and just became a muddled sound, and it wasn't audible to us or useful.
It's another setback.
Okay, let's revisit this again because we're running out of options here.
Investigators have fewer and fewer tools to work with. Bill English considers the possibility that Flight 101 hit turbulence so violent that it tore the plane apart. But the weather on the day of the crash doesn't support that theory. There were no storms that could have caused such severe turbulence. Clearly, something else had torn this plane apart. There's a possibility the Mallard collided with something in the water before takeoff.
Seaplanes don't take off of a conventional runway. They're in water where there can be things like logs or other debris, which could potentially cause structural issues with an aircraft.
But before they can reach a conclusion on that theory, investigators consider some other intriguing evidence. It's an urgent advisory issued by the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA. It warns that due to a faulty part, the propellers on the Mallard could come off during flight.
You're kidding me.
Something such as a blade separation, losing part of the propeller, could cause a great structural load on the aircraft.
English now has a solid lead, but his team is still missing the evidence they need to prove their case.
The entire island is devastated by the loss of life as investigators searching for answers wait for more wreckage to be pulled from the sea.
In the aftermath of the crash, Chalk's Ocean Airways grounds its remaining fleet of 4 Grumman Mallards. At the NTSB's Miami command post, they're working to identify various plane fragments and other debris from the crash.
We started out with the wing itself that separated the spar, which is the main part of the structure of the wing, and any of the other fracture surfaces, looking for obvious initiation factors.
They carefully examine the propellers, looking for evidence that might confirm suspicions raised by the FAA advisory. But it's another dead end.
We're able to determine all the blades were attached, and the bending that we saw was the expected pattern from proper operation when those blades hit the water.
Once again, they're back to square one.
There's the damn color. This is what I want you to look at.
Investigators focus their attention on the fractured wing. They've noticed sooting on parts of it. It's evidence of a very rapid fire.
We want to find anything that could be the initiating factor for the wing separation. Could it have been a collision with an object? Could it have been a fire? Could it have actually been a criminal act?
The burn marks raise a sinister possibility. An explosion. A bomb. This now falls outside the NTSB's area of expertise and authority.
Let's notify the FBI.
The FBI helps us in many of our investigations, and we will utilize some of their experts to rule out terrorism or a criminal act.
If it was a bomb that brought down Flight 101, a likely target would have been one of the 18 passengers.
Thanks for coming in. We're going to need your help on this.
One name stands out on the passenger manifest: Sergio D'Angelicourt.
Welcome aboard. Can I see your boarding passes?
Certainly.
There are rumors on the internet that the crash was an assassination plot and D'Angelicourt was the target. His family made a fortune in pre-Castro Cuba. They were so opposed to Fidel Castro's regime that they had allegedly supported clandestine attempts to overthrow his communist government.
This is your copy. All right? Now, there's something I want to show you. We can't tell if it's just soot or it's explosive residue.
A bomb will leave chemical traces and distinctive patterns in the torn metal. FBI technicians are specially trained to detect them. The samples from the wreckage will be tested at FBI labs in Quantico, Virginia. Four days after the accident, salvage crews are still bringing in wing fragments found at the crash site.
So we need everything that looks like it come from the right wing. Can we get some light over here? Overstress.
Most of the damage they see is from overstress fractures, areas where the metal was literally ripped apart when the wing tore off.
Come here. That's the sink.
When metal is suddenly stressed to the point of breaking, the fracture leaves a very distinctive, rough edge. It's easy to distinguish it from fractures that have developed slowly over time.
Cut this from here to here and get it to Clinton, Washington.
As we started to examine the right wing, spar and other components on scene at the Coast Guard station or the seaplane base, this was a visual examination there. We didn't have the sophisticated lab tools that we have at headquarters.
They identify parts to be shipped to the lab in Washington, where they hope closer inspection will reveal exactly what went wrong with the wing.
Hey, Clint. Clint, we're sending you as much of the wing as we have your way. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm still waiting for that report.
The results from the FBI explosives test come in.
Is that... Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
A mid-air bombing assassination could explain everything. But there is no explosive residue on the wreckage.
Okay, so that rules that out.
Structural failure is now the chief suspect in the downing of Chalk's Flight 101.
Well, that's all that's left. That's tomorrow.
It was obvious the airplane had a catastrophic structural failure. So we needed to find out the cause, the initiating factor of that structural failure.
He needs to know more about the long history of this particular Grumman Mallard.
It's very typical in any accident investigation. We want to look at the maintenance history of an aircraft. For an aircraft that's 60 years old, that's even more so important.
It takes days to comb through the 28 boxes of old records.
We want to make sure that we can develop an entire history of this aircraft, what sort of chronic problems may have shown up in the maintenance of the aircraft, and what types of work had been done on any of the factors that looked likely to be involved.
Clint Cruikshanks is a structures investigator for the NTSB.
When we go into an investigation, we try to go in with a very open mind and look at the wreckage and let it tell the story for what happened. We wanted to look at every piece that broke on the right wing to determine if this was a age-related failure or if it was something that was caused by a structural overload.
As with most aircraft, the Mallard's wings are built from aluminium alloy. The spars run the length of each wing. In between the spars are stringers that give added support. Together, these parts make up the wing box, which also doubles as a fuel tank.
And then the skin is over top of all of that structure to kind of give a smooth aerodynamic look to the wing. All of these together work to carry the flight loads that the wing is designed to carry. Once you compromise one piece of that structure, the ability to carry the normal flight loads has been compromised. Thanks.
Over the years, the wing box had been repaired many times. Chalk's mechanics had patched up areas damaged by corrosion, which is not unusual for an aging aircraft, especially a seaplane.
The fact that they land on water means that their takeoff and landing loads are different than you would have on a land-based airplane. Also, they're always in water, and the corrosive effects of water are going to happen more readily on those airplanes.
But when investigators examine the rest of the Chalk's fleet, they find that the mallards are in far worse shape than they imagined.
Corrosion repairs. Corrosion. 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 Corrosion repairs. Lots of them.
The accident airplane and the other airplanes in Chalk's fleet were rife with maintenance issues. Corrosion was rampant on all the airplanes. There was evidence of shoddy maintenance practices on all of their other airplanes.
Many of the repairs exhibited extremely poor workmanship in quality, double, triple drilling of holes, excessive grinding of corrosion, scars on the material. And this involved the structural repairs that were made to the aircraft over the past few years.
Cruikshank's attention is drawn to a section of the lower right wing. There is a metal patch called a doubler on the surface of the wing's skin.
A doubler is simply a sheet of metal that goes over top of the skin, and it acts as a load transfer. It acts as a second piece of skin to patch the crack. It's kind of like the patch on a pair of jeans.
This is a big repair job. You sure we don't have anything on this?
It's an intriguing discovery. The patch is located exactly where the wing broke off from the rest of the plane. When he takes a closer look at this section of the wing, Cruikshanks notices the edges are smooth and shiny, totally unlike the rough edges he's been seeing on other debris.
We gotta see what's under this.
This crack is not from overstress. Instead, Cruikshanks suspects it developed over many years as the result of metal fatigue.
Metal fatigue is a process by which any piece of metal, a wing spar or anything, is repetitively loaded and unloaded. You can think of it as bending a paperclip back and forth, and everyone's done this, and after a while, it eventually breaks.
Metal fatigue in the wings is caused by the stress of flight over the lifetime of the aircraft.
In the case of this aircraft, every time it took off, the wing is loaded. That's lift that gets the airplane up into the air. Every time it lands, the wing is now unloaded, and there's no more stress on the wing structure anymore. That's just like bending that paperclip back and forth.
Cruikshanks is eager to find out what's underneath the metal patch.
Okay, let's see what this doubler's hiding.
They find even more metal fatigue. Deep cracks cut across the wing. The extent of the damage is staggering. A crack 40 centimeters long.
Man, oh man.
Investigating further, Cruikshanks makes another disturbing find.
3 machined holes in the skin forward of the leading edge. All 3 appear to be stop drill holes.
The holes indicate that Chalk's mechanics had been trying to stop the crack from spreading further. Years earlier, a mechanic had spotted the crack on the lower surface of the wing. He repaired it by drilling a hole in the path of the crack. It's called a stop drill hole.
The end of a crack, you can see even with the naked eye, is sharp. It comes to a point. That tends to want to develop a crack more. By drilling a hole at the end of the crack, that would spread out the stress, and the idea is to stop the growth of the crack there.
But the stop drill holes didn't work.
An attempt was made to repair that skin on 3 different occasions by stop drilling.
Even as mechanics put in more holes, the crack kept growing.
After the 3rd stop drill, an attempt was made to further repair the wing by attaching doublers on the interior and exterior surface of the skin.
But the doublers didn't work either. The crack on the plane's skin continued to grow. Investigators now know the right wing was damaged long before the day of the accident. What they don't understand is why the crack could not be stopped.
Approved.
But a glimmer of an answer comes when they learn the plane was sending out warning signs of a deeper, more serious problem.
The Chalk's airplane involved in the accident were showing evidence of chronic fuel leaks for a long period of time, for many years.
According to the log, fuel leaks from the right wing were repaired again and again, but they kept happening.
The crews started to notice repeated fuel leaks during standard operations, and we tried to bring it up to the attention of management just for our concerns.
Just 2 days before the crash, it happened again. While doing routine maintenance on the Mallard, a mechanic came across fuel dripping from the right wing.
They always addressed the problem with trying to reseal the fuel tanks or trying to fix whatever problem they thought they had. It always seemed to be a reoccurring issue.
The procedure for plugging a leak was to apply a chemical sealant to the inside of the empty fuel tank. The sealant would take a day to dry. Then the plane could be refueled and returned to service. The leaks should have been a clue that the crack in the wing skin was just the tip of the iceberg, that there was a much more dangerous problem with the wing's interior structure.
Fuel leaks in this particular aircraft are indicative of a problem with the wing structure. In fact, Grumman put out a service bulletin back in 1963 that warned mechanics chronic fuel leaks are an indicator of a structural issue with the aircraft.
Okay, let's see what we got here.
Crookshanks examines the pieces that make up the right fuel tank.
Some kind of sealant.
He wonders why the fuel leaks persisted in spite of the constant efforts to repair them.
Hand me that scraper, please. Thank you.
Beneath the layers of sealant, he finds his answer.
Bingo.
Cracks in a critical support beam called a Z-stringer. It's the piece that the plane's skin was directly attached to.
All right, will you finish cleaning this off and then get some pictures, okay? Thank you.
Crookshanks finds evidence that Chalk's mechanics had tried to repair the stringer.
It appears that they did some grinding on the Z-stringer to remove a fatigue crack. However, they never went back in and re-inspected that area.
Instead, they only applied chemical sealant to the area to make it leak-proof, and in the process concealed the damage.
Chalk's made repeated attempts to repair the airplane by stop drilling the wing skin cracks, adding doublers over top of the cracks, but they never addressed the root of the problem, which is the cracked Z-stringer. The reason they couldn't address the Z-stringer is it was covered in fuel tank sealant.
The broken Z-stringer weakened the entire wing. Now, with every takeoff and landing, the plane's skin was absorbing the forces. Over time, the skin began to crack as well. The final outcome was inevitable.
The fatigue cracking reached critical length and the wing separated from the airplane.
investigators conclude that a hidden crack in a key component of the right wing led to the devastating crash of Flight 101. Chalk's failure to identify such a serious problem now forces investigators to re-examine the airline's long history. Chalk's Ocean Airways had an image as one of the safest airlines in the world. Despite the age of their fleet, the airline had an outstanding record of safety dating back almost 90 years.
Chalk's safety record was great. They had never lost a passenger in all the years of operation.
Chalk was an old, established company, but it seems to me that somewhere along the line, the management and the quality of the work done had slipped quite a bit from in the past years.
What have you got on the financial state of this company?
Investigators are beginning to suspect that the company's reputation for safety may have been undermined in recent years by money problems.
Financial issues in an airline, especially a small carrier like this, can manifest themselves in many ways. Personnel are sometimes one of the first things to go.
A search of Chalk's financial history uncovers some trouble. In the 1980s, Chalk's went through a string of owners before going bankrupt in 1999. The airline was revived by a Miami businessman, but it kept losing money. Just a few months before the crash, the last attempt to sell the business fell through.
Not doing so well.
It wasn't a secret that we were having financial difficulty. The pilots had taken pay cuts and the captains had taken concessions, and we downsized a lot as far as personnel.
It wasn't just personnel that felt the pinch.
It was difficult for Chalk's to find spare parts and to do some of their repairs. Chalk's had a number of other unflyable aircraft that they owned that they would cannibalize for spare parts.
There were maybe only 50 or 55 aircraft ever built. In that case, the original manufacturer, Grumman, was no longer in production of that aircraft. They no longer supplied parts.
The airline's deteriorating health and the shortage of spare parts had a direct impact on safety.
There's so much regulation and there's so much just necessity to make the airplane fly. It's hard to skimp on maintenance and not impact reliability. And if you don't have reliability, then you're just spiraling downhill.
But no matter how tight the finances were, as a commercial airline, Chalk's should have been closely monitored by the Federal Aviation Administration. In fact, the FAA did assign an inspector to work closely with Chalk's.
The FAA inspector, which is called a principal maintenance inspector, was responsible for the oversight of the maintenance program as carried out by Chalk.
The inspector was aware the plane was suffering from chronic fuel leaks. And yet, inexplicably, he gave Chalk's a clean bill of health just 2 months before the crash.
What is this guy doing?
Investigators are at a loss to explain why the FAA inspector didn't pick up on warning signs the Chalk seaplane was giving off.
The fact that Chalk was an old established carrier, maybe they just accepted, well, there's only 2 or 3 planes, it's a small operation, they only fly during the nice weathers, and they're good old boys over there, they know what they're doing.
In effect, the FAA didn't step back and take a look at that forest for the trees and find out just what's going on in the maintenance program with these Chalk's aircraft.
The FAA may not have found fault with Chalk's, but it turns out that several people very close to the airline did.
But we did talk to this group of pilots who had left Chalk's prior to the accident, and every single one of them did have some story about maintenance aspects on their aircraft, whether it had to do with fuel leaks or other maintenance aspects, they all had some level of concern about the way Chalks was taking care of these very old airplanes.
In fact, the pilots were so concerned that in the year leading up to the crash, many of them met to discuss the problem of declining maintenance.
The captains of the company decided that it would be best for us to get together as a group, discuss the issues that we had to try to get our concerns addressed. One major issue that had happened, we had an elevator cable that had snapped in flight, and the crew luckily was able to get the airplane down using power and different settings and shifting people. But in most scenarios, that would have been an accident in itself. In aviation, there's error chains that they talk about, and you have to just, if you keep compiling one link after another, it's only a matter of time before an accident will occur. And from my point of view, I thought that if they kept going down the same road that they were going down, something could happen.
Eventually, Captain Weber decided he'd seen enough close calls.
My turning point and why I decided to leave Chalks was I just had seen too many things in the recent months, too many mechanical issues that were major issues in my mind, and I had 300 failures myself that year, and I had a wife at home that was pregnant. I had lost, I guess, my confidence in the company's ability or the airplane, and I just had had enough.
The NTSB's report on the crash of Flight 101 harshly criticizes the FAA for not detecting growing maintenance and financial problems at Chalks.
Had the maintenance program or the FAA stepped back and said, these aircraft need more than just a one-time fix. They need something much deeper than this, the accident probably would not have happened.
It also uncovers a loophole in the FAA's aging aircraft regulations, which require extra inspections for older planes. But those rules didn't apply to Mallards.
The Grumman Mallard was manufactured in 1947. It only carried 17 passengers, and it was not a transport category airplane. Therefore, it was exempt from these supplemental inspections. What we have here is the FAA has made an aging airplane safety rule, and they've exempted the oldest airplanes in the fleet.
The NTSB recommends that the FAA expand its oversight of aging planes.
When we determine the probable cause of an aircraft, the point is to do this so that similar accidents won't happen again in the future. I think we've used this accident to point towards the industry and the FAA to make sure that they take a look at the overall picture of what's going on at an air carrier.
Flight 101 spelled the end of Chalks Ocean Airways. A few months after the report was released, the airline shut down.
There was a lot of history and a lot of family community involved with the passengers as well as the people in the airline. So to see the whole airline and everything else kind of go down with the airplane is additionally, emotional for everybody that ever worked there or ever loved the airplanes.